All right, welcome back, everybody, from summer break. It's nice to see everybody's faces. It is September 2nd, and this is the Bothell City Council meeting. And if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we are missing only two council members this evening. Deputy Mayor Spivey and Councilmember Agnew are absent and excused. If everybody's had a chance, I don't know, hopefully, to look over tonight's meeting agenda, are there any changes, corrections, time additions that are requested? Councilmember Sandberg.
I would like to add 10 minutes, no, an additional 5 minutes, so for a total of 10 minutes for Agenda Bill 14125, which is the Wilson Avenue vacation.
Okay.
I have a couple questions on that.
Great.
And then to add 15 minutes for Agenda Bill 14126, the utility revenue bond ordinance.
Okay.
And Agenda Bill 14129, which is the removing density limit in the downtown transition district. Add 15 minutes to that, please.
Great. I'm certainly in support of those. Everybody else, any? Great.
And did we need to, I see some members of the audience, do we need to reorder anything?
We don't.
Okay.
How about you, Councilmember Ram? Any changes, additions? No? How about on the projected agenda? Councilmember Evans?
So on the capital facilities plan, that will be a presentation by staff to the council, and then is the council committee that reviewed that, do we have any, will we be making any presentations on that or just commenting committee in general? Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? Is the draft capital facilities plan the one that's on the website, the one that's going to appear in our packet on Friday? So if we wanted to start looking at it ahead of time, we would know we were going to be looking at the document that we would be reviewing ultimately next week?
Yes, the document online is the one that you'll be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Councilmember Lamb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a proposal that I'd like to put on a future agenda meeting. It's not particularly time sensitive, but if we could get to it before the end of this year, that would be great. There's a policy idea that's been circulating that's sort of a mirror image of what our state voters have set up on tax increases, but it's providing for having a supermajority of council to impose a tax increase. It wouldn't be for all tax increases. It would be for certain fees. And in this case, in the city of Bothell, we don't, for example, have a B&O tax. You could put it on individual categories. I think it's an idea that's worth considering, particularly for new fees that aren't currently in existence before we impose them. And so I'd like to add that as a discussion item if council is interested in hearing more about that idea.
Yeah, I'm certainly in support. Several nodding heads, so there you go, City Manager.
Thank you.
You'll probably get a packet from Councilmember Lamb in that regard,
Yes.
which I read 2 weeks ago. Great. Anything else in projected agenda? No. We have two special presentations this evening. Amy Spain has joined us from the Snohomish County Tourism, so to give us an update on how things are going in Snohomish County, and since a little bit under half of our city is in Snohomish County, it used to be balanced. It just changed recently. We're certainly glad to be here, and the majority of council actually believe you're in Snohomish County, Bill's in Snohomish County.
That's probably the
That's it.
largest percentage
Okay.
that's been Snohomish County.
Perfect. So, Amy, thanks for joining us this evening, and we look
Thank
forward to hearing the update from you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. I'm really pleased to be here. It's been a while since I've presented before City Council, and a number of new faces have joined the council since that time, so I'm pleased to be here. I'm going to start with a bit of an overview of tourism trends, a little bit nationally, statewide, before I dive into Snohomish County, and then the majority of my presentation will be about activities that the Tourism Bureau is engaged in to market Snohomish County as a visitor destination. I've got a lot of information. Copies of my slide presentation are in your packets that City Clerk Laura Hathaway put before you, so you have those to refer to, and I'll try to leave a couple of minutes for questions as well. So I'm just going to zoom ahead here. So this is a really terrible slide, difficult to see. Good slide, difficult to see. But I wanted to point out the impact of tourism. So you have your travelers here at the top of this slide, and they come to a destination by a variety of vehicles. And while they're here, they're buying gas, they're buying food, they're staying either in campgrounds or lodging, bed and breakfast, hotels. They're enjoying themselves in entertainment and recreation. And all of that activity is what we talk about when we say visitor spending. That's direct visitor spending. Indirect visitor spending would be then the result from those companies who then are able to employ people within your community, and they in turn, and this may be difficult to see at the bottom of the slide, but they in turn work with local vendors who, again, that's multiplying that effect of the tourism spend within your community. And from the taxes resulting from all of those, that is what supports the infrastructure within the city. So that's when we talk about tourism being economic development. It's every stage of that. Nationally, tourism is over an $850 billion industry and employs almost 8 million people around the country. And again, those are direct travel-related jobs. Within Washington State, it's the fourth largest industry, generating over $17 billion in visitor spending. The important part for many, and I'll talk about this at a county level, is the city and county taxes and state taxes that's generated from that visitor spend. So nearly $1.1 billion in local and state taxes are generated, and over 154,000 people are directly employed by tourism businesses in the county. I don't know if you are aware, but Washington State is the only state in the country without a state tourism office. In 2011, the legislature removed all funding for our state tourism office. And so at that time, the Washington Tourism Alliance was founded really to just be that catcher's mitt so that there was a place and a agency to turn over the assets. We had photo inventories, databases, obviously, our visitor guide, our state tourism website. So those assets were turned over to the Washington Tourism Alliance, which is a membership-based organization. Membership-funded model is not sustainable. And so that group of people has been looking at this. This is why it's not sustainable. We are not marketed on an international or even national level as a state. So that falls to the individual county and city destination marketing organizations. And as you can see from this slide, it's a pretty dire picture. So the Washington Tourism Alliance, which is comprised of folks within the 5 major tourism industry sectors, and these are not all of the tourism industry sectors, but these were the 5 industry sectors that gathered originally to try to devise a plan for a long-term funding approach. Those industries recognized that the weight of the State Tourism Office could not be borne on any one industry sector, but really needed to be broad-based in order to reach the $7.5 million, which is what they're recommending for an initial budget. Each of those sectors will determine how they will generate their portion of that $7.5 million budget, and those discussions are taking place. Some of them are fairly simple. Accommodations, they'll just put a cent assessment on that folio when the guest checks out. Others are a little bit more difficult when you talk about a very small food service business, as an example, compared to a national chain. Should it be the same? So each of those sectors are determining how they're going to come up with that amount, that percentage calculation. This is a snapshot of travelers to Washington State. 2.2 people per travel party. They stay 2.5 nights. They spend $462 per travel party per day, and that's where that generation of $17.6 billion comes from, and that's an annual basis. Apologize for the little wacky font in that screen. Tried to correct that before we got started. So the effect in Snohomish County, over 10,000 people are directly employed by tourism businesses in the county. And what's important to the cities and to the county is that it generates almost $18 million in taxes. That's $18 million that you and I and your residents of the county, over the city rather, don't have to pay. Visitor spending in Snohomish County is approaching $1 billion industry. We're in 2013, it was $930 million from visitor spending. That was an increase. And what I'd like to point out here is that many people think about hotels or accommodations being the largest recipient of that visitor dollar. And you can see from those numbers, in fact, it's fifth on the list. Much of 2013 and 2012 and 13, the Tourism Bureau and members of the community throughout the county were engaged in nearly a year-long process of research. We did an audit, a situation analysis, a competitive analysis of where Snohomish County is as a visitor destination, who we as residents of Snohomish County think we are as a tourism destination, and overlying that with what the consumer surveys showed us and the competitive surveys showed us. Over a dozen points of research were conducted over that year-long process to develop the brand strategy from which all of our tourism marketing is based. This is really bad. Let me just escape this for a second and see if I can get this. For some reason, it shows. There we go. So the brand platform is based on 4 components. Who is our target audience? What is the frame of reference? What's the point of difference from our competitors? And what's the benefit ultimately to the visitor? So for Snohomish County, that brand platform, for those wanting to explore and pursue Snohomish County, between Seattle and Canada along I-5 and barely contained by Puget Sound and the Cascades, is where Seattle gets outside and opportunities open up. Open up to adventure, to excitement, to discovery, to flavor, to life. We are able to modify that primary message depending on the market segment that we are advertising to and what that particular message is. As part of that research, and also a year-long study that was taken into account during 2010 when the Snohomish County government did a strategic tourism planning process, we identified that there are 6 primary visitor draws to Snohomish County. So these are the things that we can hang our hat on, that we can really claim. Aviation, outdoor recreation, our gaming assets, shopping, sports, and business and events-based travel. Those are the 6 primary reasons that people are coming to Snohomish County. So our marketing strategies align with those segments. We've integrated our brand into all of our communication tools. We have 2 websites, our primary website, snohomish.org, and we also have a weddings website, snohomishcountyweddings.com. As the slide shows you there, our weddings website is all about wedding facilities and resources for the bride and groom. So within our primary website, snohomish.org, we have information about each of the cities, as well as links, important links within your community, the chambers, the cities, the school districts, etc. On our website, we also have the opportunity for visitors to explore our region in 2 primary ways. They can explore by interest category, and this is a screenshot, the drop-down screen there, or by area, of either by city or by region within the county. So just as an example, I've showed the explore outdoor activities, and this is what pops up. So all of the outdoor recreational activities are presented in a detail page. You click on any one of those. Let me back up. So I'll come back to that detail page in a moment. The visitor can also explore by regions. So here I've just done the drop-down menu for a zoomed-in portion of Bothell, and there's a couple of these little detail pages that pop up. When the visitor clicks on that, this is what they see. So they have more information about each one of those tourism businesses, pictures, as well as all the contact information, a direct link to their website, and then social media where they can tweet it and they can share it by Facebook, email it to a friend. We also have the events calendar. Same as our Explore pages, you can create a date range that you're interested in seeing what the events are. You can search by city, and you can also, although I didn't do a screenshot of this, you can search by category. So you can look at performing arts or agricultural events or farms and festivals, etc. So after you click on that, and excuse the repetition, this has been fixed, but that partially was because of the date range that I put in there. Then each one of those detail pages, the visitor can click on and get more information and direct links to those events, festivals, etc. With our Snohomish County Weddings website, we also offer the opportunity for businesses to be listed. So in a search of Bothell, this is the top part of that screenshot showing several of the wedding venues that are within the city, and each one of those has a detailed page as well. All of those listings and the links and the pictures, we don't charge for tourism businesses to be on our website. That's provided for us through our funding. Additional resources such as florists, caterers, bakeries, etc., are also linked through to that weddings website. We are very active in social media. We have Flickr, Twitter, 5 different Facebook pages, 25 different Pinterest accounts that we are keeping track of, and we are communicating to these different market segments so that we have different messaging going to someone who's interested in sports versus a family traveler. So we cater and tailor those messages depending on the avenue through which we are communicating. So as I said, about 25 different Pinterest boards on a variety of activities. The technology trends, I don't need to say too much about that. Everybody is overwhelmed with the advance of technology, and the tourism industry has been a forerunner in a number of ways to technology, or rather visitors have become comfortable using technology in planning their vacations. And it is estimated that mobile devices are going to account for more than 25% of the total online bookings by next year. So as part of that, we have made sure our websites are mobile enabled. So whether you're looking at our website on a mobile device, a tablet, a laptop, or anything in between, we have a responsive screen. So it will realign the information to make it easier for that visitor to view. We have 17 different videos on our YouTube channel, all giving little snippets of information for travelers to explore Snohomish County with 3 to 5 minute video segments. All of our creative executions have been adopted, this new brand, as you see. Our ads generated over 11,000 requests for information in 2013, and this is a list of some of those media outlets that we utilize to further our message. And that, again, was based on the research we did on where our travelers are coming from and what kind of publications that they're reading. These are just a couple examples of some of the new mobile tours that we created in 2013, and those included family-friendly activities, a shopping tour, and a tour of the aviation assets the mural tour in Edmonds were all created in 2013. We have a meeting and event facility guide and a package travel guide, which is group tours, bus tours, if you will, that provides itineraries as well as attractions and activities for those specific market segments to participate in. We produce 85,000 copies of a seasonal visitor guide, one of which is in your packets. And we create internal pieces as well, climbing in Snohomish County, or generic sheets that our hotels and meeting venues can use when they are attracting a group to come to their hotel or to their venue. We provide these at no charge to the tourism businesses. We communicate with visitors, past visitors and potential visitors, through a quarterly e-newsletter. And we have a number of tourism promotional programs. One is Tourism Revealed, which is an opportunity for visitors to go online and create an account. And when they do so, they have access to deals and discounts that we have solicited from tourism businesses in the county. So it's just one more way that businesses can reach that visitor through that program. Our group sales efforts are in a variety of market segments. I won't read through this list, but you'll see that they include trade shows and sales missions to the bus tour industry. That package travel is what that industry sector is called. Sports, to direct to consumers, to meetings and events and conventions, as well as working directly with the media. This is the slide that our hoteliers care about. We booked over 20,000 room nights in 2013 with an economic impact of almost $22 million as a result of the direct sales efforts from our staff. The Snohomish County Sports Commission is a separate 501c organization, but is very much linked to the Snohomish County Tourism Bureau, so that we are always acting in concert with the different marketing strategies. And this is a list of the Sports Commission Board of Directors that are working with our sports staff for referrals, for resources, direction, and oversight on that specific plan. I should back up and say the Tourism Bureau also has a board of directors. We are majority hoteliers on our board because we are funded primarily from lodging tax, so we keep that in front of us. And the remaining seats are filled by a variety of tourism businesses throughout the county. As part of our media relations, we create a bi-monthly storyline, which is a newsletter that goes to about 1,400 travel writers, editors, and publications every other month, and it's about they're generally themed storylines or what's newsworthy. So it just depends on what's happening in our county and how we're messaging that. We work directly with travel writers by going to conferences and meeting with them one-on-one, as well as bringing them to Snohomish County. So we had 17 travel writers come to the county last year and toured them to whatever their specific publication was seeking information about. We manage the visitor information centers in Snohomish County as well. We have 3, one in East County in the city of Snohomish with those partners as listed, one in the South County to try to reach travelers that are coming up both the 405 and the I-5, and in the city of Linwood. And in the beginning of 2013, we took over management of the Visitor Information Center at the Future Flight in Mukilteo. We take our role as trying to educate our industry sector seriously. We have a number of programs that we put in place last year, including a hot sheet, which is sent on the first of every month, that just lists some of the key activities and events that are taking place that month. We send that to hotel general managers, front office managers, whoever that appropriate person is at the hotel and at the attractions, so that they can better refer their visitor. We also have a tourism industry month where local attractions provide free of charge entry so that those frontline staff members can experience the event, the attraction themselves, and again are better able to refer and sell that. So for 2014, we have a number of initiatives that we are working on. We've implemented our new destination brand, as we talked about. We've already published the meeting facility guide, and we are now going to print on a brand new arts and cultural brochure. We had a couple of television commercials that we produced highlighting our aviation attractions and the outdoor adventure recreation in Snohomish County. We're still working on our weddings website to provide some more filters so that it's a little bit easier for brides and grooms to find the information that they need. We're pleased that we are now implementing digital kiosks in the Linwood Convention Center and at the Tulalip Resort at their concierge desk, so that countywide tourism information is available to visitors at those 2 key attractions. And we're always working on new itineraries and maps and promotions to secure information for visitors. And we're doing all of that because tourism matters. Again, in Snohomish County, it's our 3rd largest industry. We employ over 10,000 people. And most importantly to city councils is that visitor spending generates almost $18 million that's left here in the city and county coffers. So with that, I've talked very quickly. I hope I left a couple of minutes for questions, should you have any. Thank you, Council.
Amy, thank you so much. Does anybody on council have any comments or questions? Councilmember Sandberg? Sure, Councilmember Sandberg raised her hand right before you said. So ladies first, is that all right?
So from your presentation, I understood that the funding from the state level has evaporated, and that it's not necessarily sustainable to do funding in a piecemeal effort. So are you making specific requests to cities or other member organizations
No, not at this point. So the Washington Tourism Alliance, this membership-based organization, has, I think, just 2 staff members and then a whole host of volunteers from all those different industry sectors that have been at the table for the last 3 years to talk about how can we find a sustainable funding model. They've looked at funding models from all over the country and have determined this assessment model to be the best fit under those 5 industry categories to get the program up and started. So where we are right now is that there was legislation at the state level this spring that provided some staff resources within the state legislature to provide some support for this organization as we're trying to figure out how can we assess what's the implementation of that, what are some roadblocks, those kinds of questions. So we've got state staff assisting that group in figuring out the whys and wherefores and the nuts and bolts of how this could work. So that report from the Washington Tourism Alliance is due to the governor in December, and then in 2015 we hope to be moving forward with an assessment plan under those 5 industry categories to create the basis funding for a state tourism organization. Does that answer your question?
Well, it sounds like you're doing looks like you're doing some fabulous things. So
Trying.
Thank you for
Thank you so much.
bringing tourism to Snohomish County.
Thank you.
Councilmember Evans.
My question was kind of along the same line, the fact that we don't have a state budget now for this, and how we come up with one and we assess that. And I thought I understood you to say that there could be fees added on to the different services, whether it be hotels or restaurants and things. And there was just an article, or I read somewhere, I can't remember where it talked about, be careful of all the add-ons that are out there.
Right. I think what you might be referring to, just last week there was some national news about quoting prices. And so when you call and say, gosh, how much is a hotel room? And they'll say it's $99. They don't say what the taxes and assessments are. So you may
Right.
end up paying $120 or whatever it might be, right?
Right.
And so that's what that issue was about, is being transparent at the time that prices are being quoted, is to include those taxes and assessments. That can be tough for businesses in a competitive standpoint because different cities have different tax structures. So that's kind of why they've always just done that base rate, particularly with a national chain. It's 8.2% here and 10.2% there, and so they just quote what their base rate is when they're doing national promotions. But that, if it's the same article that I heard as well, it was about transparency and that bottom line, what the cost is.
So there's the potential here, one of the considerations is to even add more costs or more tax to those different activities.
To those
or whatever.
5 different segments are the 5 segments that are at the table right now and have agreed in concept to this assessment-based model and have agreed in concept to the total amount that that industry sector is to generate. But each of those sectors is working out those fine details. So the example that I used was in food service. You may have a large national chain restaurant, and then you've got a mom-and-pop hot dog stand. Should they be assessed the same? Probably not. And so that sector is an example. They're looking, do we have a minimum gross profit before any assessment kicks in? Or are we only going to assess hotels of a certain number of rooms or more? So each industry sector is still working out the details of how they're going to achieve that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that comes about because
Right.
as you get your bill, whenever you're checking out or turning back your car back in or whatever the case may be, it's interesting all those additional charges and how that
Right.
will affect the industry, as far as people doing things. It's,
Right.
so it'll be interesting
Right.
to see how that goes.
Well, and competitively, Snohomish County is less expensive both from a price point and from the taxes and assessments than our neighbors to the south. And so we're competitively positioned well, even should this assessment go, and it will be statewide. Obviously, it won't be county by county or city by city. It will be statewide. So,
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Ram.
Well, thank you for your important work. It's really
Thank
nice
you.
to have you come in. So I have a quick question. So the stats you provided is really kind of focused, I think, on out-of-state travelers coming into state. And I was wondering if the Tourism Bureau, do you look at in-state travel? Like,
We
you know, I
do.
want to go up to Snohomish County for the day and go
Right,
home.
we do. And in fact, the stats that I provided include in-state travelers as well.
Oh.
So a visitor is defined by someone who travels more than 50 miles one way to get to the destination. That's how the industry terms a visitor, and that's nationally. They've sort of agreed if you travel 50 miles or more, then you're more likely to stay overnight, you're more likely to engage in recreational activities and spend more money in that destination. Within Washington State, actually, we have one of the highest percentages of in-state travel than any state in the country. So Washingtonians travel within the state. We've got a lot of diversity right here within our borders, and so we have a high degree of travelers from in-state. And so our top 3 destinations from the research that we did where our travelers are coming from are Vancouver, BC, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle. So the hotels are, and that was surprising to us. We really didn't expect that we'd see as high a percentage of overnight travelers from the Seattle market. But many of the communities in Snohomish County are far enough away to make that a weekend getaway, that they are driving and they'll go to a B&B or stay at a resort or a hotel and make a weekend out of it. So our local, relatively speaking, local travelers from King County is within the top 3 of our lead generators.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I had just a kind of a parochial question about Bothell because we are half in one county and half in the other. Do King County attractions feature on in the King County portion of our city? Can you include those? Is that are we grandfathered in? Okay.
So it is a delicate balance. Since we are funded out of lodging tax, the hotels within the city limits of Bothell that are on the King County side are not on our website.
Okay.
But the tourism attractions, some of the restaurants, the festivals, and those kinds of things, the art is another example in our new art brochure that we're about ready to go to print on. We do include things from throughout the city of Bothell.
So we do have a new attraction coming online that is breaking around McMinimans, which
Yes,
is going to break
we've
ground
been
this
watching
month.
very
And put that
closely.
so, and that does, although it is a lodging in the
Yes.
King County portion, it does also have some attractions that might be on there. So I'm hopeful
And
that we could see
restaurant,
them.
brewery, so
That's
those
right.
things will be included.
Okay,
Yes.
good to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks,
So
Amy.
our-
Really appreciate you coming to make the presentation. Curious about the spending that the state does for tourism. I believe there's a responsibility on behalf of each one of us, and then as a city, we all have to tell our own story. It's our responsibility to tell our story for a business, or our responsibility as a city to tell a story, and I'm surprised the state doesn't want to tell our story. And I'm looking at the spending of just to ourselves, $12 million, Montana $12 million, Idaho $7 million, California 50, and we're 481. We're not even in the game. We're not
Right.
telling our story, and our
Not at
neighbors
all.
certainly aren't going to tell it for us. This
Right.
has put us
Yeah.
behind.
Yes, it is. And in 2011, when the legislature removed all funding from the State Tourism Office, was a difficult budget year. There were some people in positions at that time that I don't think fully understood the economic impact of tourism, and maybe we as an industry weren't successful in communicating that well. So there were budget cuts across the board, and unfortunately, the State Tourism Office was on the chopping block. Many of our legislators recognize that that perhaps was not a good strategy, and so we do have support of many of the legislators at the state level, but we're not going back to what we had before because those funds can be swept at any time. So that's why we're looking at dedicated funds and assessment from the various industry sectors so that we can generate enough money. Even before the State Tourism Office was closed, we had less than a $2 million budget per year. It's just not enough to do anything. So our industry is trying to come up and work with a public-private partnership that will secure the kind of funds that we need to at least play the game. So I
Wonderful.
couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, do you have an analysis of the other states, what their return on investment was as compared to our return on
Oh, I
investment?
don't have it off the top of my head, but absolutely, return on investment is something that is studied at city level, at county level, and certainly at state and national levels as well. And I've seen different reports for different states in different years, but it's at a minimum 3 to 1, and I've seen as high as 25 to 1 in dollars spent and the return on the visitor spending. So it is economic development. It's an investment, not an expense.
Yeah, that's right. So, as my last question to you, considering what happened at the state 2 to 3 years ago, would our dollars traveling down and staying in a hotel in Olympia to watch the entertainment that goes down there be considered tourism dollars?
It would be.
Oh, good.
To Olympia.
There you go. Something entertaining to watch. Amy,
That's
thank you
right.
so much for your presentation this
Thank
evening
you.
and your leadership in Snohomish County.
Well, my pleasure. And I'll leave you with one more comment. One of the pages that's in your packet, you might kind of be thinking, what the heck is that? This is what it folds up to. Do you remember these as a kid? Or
Yeah, I
your
did that.
children or
Every
grand-
time I do it, it says, "Come dine in Bothell."
That's right.
So,
So we created these for each of the communities within Snohomish County, and it's been one of the most requested leave-behind pieces when we're at a consumer trade show. People come by, where's my city, where's my city, where do I find this? So you can make your own with this sheet that's in your packet. Thank you again, Mayor and council members.
thank you, and I hope you can get your car safe and dry. It sounds very stormy.
I have an umbrella with me.
Good deal. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Just before we jump into the next section, kind of as a lead on, I spent the last 2 weeks in Naroke County in Kenya, which was a very interesting time. My wife and I went and worked with 80 local Kenyans to dig a foundation for a week and then mix concrete. But while I was there, I met with local leadership to talk about a potential sister city relationship, and they are extremely interested. And if you know where Naroke is, it's the Mara, and it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. They don't currently have a sister city relationship, and I mentioned Aaron's name and Bill's name and several others, potentially what could happen there. And talked about tourism, which is certainly their number one driver of economic means down in the city of Naroke and the surrounding areas. And so I'd like to, at some time here in the near future, continue to talk with leadership here in the city to see if that's something we might be interested in. But one thing I mentioned as well was the great university that we have within the city of Bothell, because they have a University of Naroke as well, which they come from counties around to go there. And they have a large population of course, herders, but also farmers that create corn. So I thought of our biotech industry here in the city of Bothell and how potentially we as a city can go to Naroke and be part of what is happening there. I thought it would be pretty neat. And certainly having the University of Washington, which has been most recently recognized by Money Magazine as the number one place in Washington State for your best value. I think that's something that we could go proudly and talk about there. I have just a quick thing I'd like to read, given to me by a very good friend of ours in our city, Kelly Snyder. If you wouldn't mind, I'm almost going to read it verbatim. Okay. She wanted to share that Money Magazine, wrote recently the best colleges in the nation for your money, evaluating 665 four-year schools. The magazine assessed colleges on 17 measures around education quality, affordability, and career earnings. Through the process, University of Washington Bothell ranked number 37 overall in the nation and 10 out of public four-year institutions. Out of the nation, right here in Bothell. University of Washington was also ranked number 7 for colleges that add the most value, or schools that turn out graduates who exceed the salary averages of their peer group within the widest margin. Pretty impressive. So I've asked the Chancellor hopefully to come back and put together a presentation for us, maybe 20, 30 minutes of what degrees are offered, because I think it's our responsibility as a city to tell our story. And certainly if we have the University of Washington getting these recognitions, that we would like to hear more about them. And just quickly before I get into it, Kelly Snyder has been a member of our community for many years and has done more than we potentially even could ever recognize, with 2 new buildings on the campus that have been built and continual progression of our university and development. Kelly, I thank you so much for your leadership of what you've done here for the city of Bothell. It's very impressive. And you represent the university extremely well in Olympia through all your efforts in campaigning. I've run down into you several times, which means you're down there for far more than I am. So thank you. Chancellor Yeh, thank you so much for coming tonight. I don't know if you would be willing to come to the podium and just share maybe a little bit more about this Money Magazine article and maybe a commitment to come back and give us a presentation. Chancellor Yeh, thank you for joining us.
Well, the Bothell Council and community members, on behalf of faculty, staff, and students and the University of Washington Bothell community, I thank you for the recognition. We're actually celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and there are many programs that we have put together that's going to highlight our humble existence, founding 25 years ago in the Canyon Park. I don't know, I think it's this direction, isn't it? And our current location right here in Bothell, just over the hill, we've been there since 2000. And as we're looking to grow, one thing that not only this recognition is very special because it really looks at access, affordability, and success, but the same article talked about UW-Bothell being the third fastest growing university in the U.S. of the institutions noted. So but as we look to grow, as of today, we're actually up 12%, and we still have 2 more weeks of registration to go. And the campus and our enrollment and our programs, they're all going to grow. So one of the things that our campus is doing that we'll be happy to share with you, and actually we want you to participate with us in not only having growing the campus, but how can we grow smartly with the city? Because with the wonderful development that's happening here, like the Bothell Landing, and all the other projects that are going on. In fact, tomorrow I hear is great groundbreaking. So all those things happening, and the activities are happening on the campus. How can we get the two bodies to work more in sync, really bringing out the best in both institutions? So we really look forward to the wonderful times ahead, and look to really working closely with the city.
Excellent. You willing to come back and share a few of the degrees and a few more things that the university is doing?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right, that ends our special presentations. Thank you both for coming. Thank you, Mrs. Spain, for coming. Next is our visitors section. I don't have a sign-up sheet. Is nobody signed up yet? Are there any visitors this evening that would like to address council? If so, just raise your hand. Ma'am? Yeah, if you would just come forward. As always, we give our speakers 3 minutes to address council on matters that are important to them and important to us as a city as well.
My name is Mary Farley, and I live at 18832 Bothell Way Northeast in Bothell. I really didn't want to be first, but I guess I am.
You might be first and last.
First of all, I want to make a statement about how good Bothell is doing. You know, there's probably very few towns in the United States that had visitors putting chairs along the parade route 2 weeks before the 4th of July. So you're doing something right. I'm also really impressed with the way you've kept the roads up during all of the rain, all of the wind, and all of the construction. They've been clean and they've been passable, and I'm impressed and I'm grateful. So I'm here to talk about the increased density proposal that you're considering, sure, and the parking. And I'm really opposed to increased density because I think it benefits the developers, but I'm not sure how much it really benefits the city of Bothell in terms of tax revenue. But I'm really, really concerned about the parking changes. I was at Rite Aid last Friday between 6:15 and 6:30, and in the store there were 6 to 10 people, including the employees, and there was not one parking place in the whole parking lot. Now that was because, you know, the restaurant was busy with Friday afternoon, but this is before the football season, before McMenamins. We do not have enough parking in Bothell. We started out talking about parking in Bothell when all of us started talking. When was that? 5-6 years ago. And people are parking on sidewalks now. Now, as I understand it, as a homeowner, I'm responsible for the repair and replacement of a sidewalk. Am I also responsible for liability because there's, you know, impeded visibility when you enter the roadway? I would think that there would be some liability. And it's not just going to affect the apartments and condos that are being built with increased density. It's going to impact every neighborhood. And I really think we need to be very careful about changing it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just curious, we're talking about the downtown transition areas.
I am.
Okay.
I am. That's where I live.
Sure.
But I think it's just something we need to consider throughout the Bothell area right now.
Are you opposed to all locations for the downtown transition area or certain portions, or would you be open to any areas of the downtown transition area that...
You know, I know you have all studied that more than I have. But what I do know is that it doesn't just affect the building. It affects the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Look around tonight at all the people that are parking in places that are not designated because, you know, the parking lot across the street is closed, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
And
I agree with your
just
concern with parking for sure. With the City Hall, we're adding, I think, 300 spaces, and then I got a call from Dow Constantine, the King County executive, I think it was 4 weeks ago, and their commitment of several $1 million to build a regional parking facility in Bothell. So that is definitely a positive thing that we'll be getting some more information on in the very near future to get out to the community. That's a big step.
Absolutely.
Over $5 million, I believe, is the amount that we're getting from the county.
And I'm sorry, I'm probably exceeding my time, but I just want to request that if they're going to build a new parking facility, that please have bus shelters. Mm-hmm. We've got one in Bothell, and that's the only one we're going to have until we get a transit system. Great. I know because we've been trying to decorate them, the Bothell Museum, and it's not going to happen until we get more parking.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Any further public comment, sir? If you come forward and just give your name for the record. You can give your address if you wish. It's not required anymore.
Mike Robinson. I live at 18608 101st Avenue Northeast, and I speak in support of what Mary was just talking about, because those of us that live in, the edges of downtown, it's very intense, and there is a traffic thing that goes on with all of the people driving through the neighborhoods now, and parking, as everybody knows, in the downtown core is real inconvenient for anybody who's trying to shop, and so they're parking more in the neighborhoods, and time goes on, and we do have to do something, because pretty soon it is going to get to that point where it is a major problem, and then you can't go back on it. But also the transition zone thing. We went through something similar in the mid-'80s when we had single family and we had high density and we had downtown, but we did have a buffer zone. And through compromise with the city and the neighborhood and the people, we got an effective buffer zone. It's kind of immune from what we're doing now with West Hill and Valley View. But it's the same thing. And people that live in these neighborhoods, and we still are a real core, there is a big neighborhood all around downtown, deserve to have some of that ease of transition from high density to very low residential. And those same streets are the ones we're trying to park so that people can come home and park. Because every time you put an apartment building, it brings some extra traffic to the streets and the neighborhoods and everything. But it's working pretty good, and I know you guys are being sensible about some of the way you're thinking about what the developers need to do, too. Pretty much what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks. Just one last point. I missed your name because I didn't hear it very clearly.
Mike Robinson, R-O-B-I-S-O-N.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. And a point of clarity for me on the last statement I made, I said the county, but it's actually Sound Transit that will be contributing $5 million as we move forward. So we'll get some more information from Sound Transit on that for both the council and the community as we move further steps forward. Anybody else from the public that would like to address council this evening? All right, moving on from our visitor section onto our consent agenda. No items were pulled this evening. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Evans. If everybody could place their vote. And if the clerk can display, we have a unanimous vote in the positive with Councilmember Agnew and Councilmember Spivey absent and excused. First, let's see, item AB 14-122 for consider approval of professional service agreement with the Portico Group of Design at the Park at Bothell Landing is the next on the agenda. And Pat Parkhurst, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to ask tonight, Council consider approval of professional service agreement with the Portico Group for design services for the Park at Bothell Landing. Back in 2010, the City Council adopted the master plan for the Park at Bothell Landing, and this contract will take us to the next step towards development. The 2014 capital facilities plan included design funds for this project. This will prepare us for any potential grants in the future, and also by having this design done, it'll allow us to look to the future. If a commercial venture should come along that wants to locate in the park, we need to know what the parameters of the park are so they could locate in the park. Portico Group was selected by staff through a interview process. We interviewed 5 consulting firms, and they were the one that staff felt could best meet the needs for the next phase of this project. With that, if there's any questions?
Great, thanks, Pat. Anybody questions? Councilmember Evans.
Just a few questions. Pat, do you know offhand, with the 2 new parking lots, the east and the west, how many parking stalls are in those approximately?
Of course, I don't remember off the top of my head. Actually, I think it's on the master plan here. I think it's 100, roughly.
Count it now.
146?
How many?
146.
146.
They're actually on the master plan design.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone knows how that compares to what we had before. Are we gaining parking or
I believe it's about the same.
about the same? We didn't lose any? Great. And could you just briefly explain, is there a difference between the Cafe Plaza and the Gathering Plaza?
So the Cafe Plaza would be immediately adjacent to the cafe.
Which we're not building.
We're not
there.
building at this time. And then
But
the
it's just
Gathering Plaza is like the fountain area and around the fountain area.
So are they going to be the same materials, potentially?
Correct.
I mean, the visitor won't know whether they're on the Cafe Plaza or the Gathering. It's just a plaza
Correct.
is what we're saying. Okay. I noticed lighting is in here, and I wondered what that was because my past experience in Parks and Recreation lighting was always a vandalism target for us. When we would light our parks at night, even though we had a closure at dusk, but the kids loved to shoot out the lights or whatever in the park. So what type of lighting are we proposing here? And will there still be a park closure time of dusk?
Right. So if the Lyle House is going to be used as a venue and you have the cafe, you have to have area lighting for the parking lots. We've not had problems with the area lighting that's in the park today.
Really?
We do have tall street light lights in throughout the park, and we don't have problems with those. So as to hours, we haven't talked about whether we would expand the hours.
Okay. Technically, the park closes at dusk,
Yes.
so these are just area lighting or something, maybe not. Okay. This particular contract, as I understand it, is for the schematic design for the entire park?
It'll give us some base points for the entire park, but the emphasis is on the new areas of the park, the new 3 acres that we've gained as part of the road project.
Okay, and are we updating the cost estimate for the entire park as part of this phase? I thought I saw that in the scope of work.
Yes, that's our hope.
But this contract does not include any fees or funding for construction drawings at this point. We're only going through the schematic phase, is that correct?
Correct. Some preliminary construction, but it won't be ready to go to permit.
So we're really not going to design development or construction drawings or anything at this point. So I question, the contract said that this work was to be done by February 28th, 2015. If we were to delay this contract or structure it differently so that we know what funding we have and what funding we hope to expect, but until we know that, we really don't. It's difficult to we certainly can't move forward with final design of anything. So what would there be a delay if we were to delay this a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, how would that affect the project overall?
So slide everything a couple of months. Again, this is coming forward because it was part of the capital facilities plan in the budget for 2014, and the intent was to get some things tightened up so that we could go out for more grant funding potentially, and that we could have answers if a commercial venture came along that wanted to build in the park. So it would slide it a few months.
Would it affect a potential construction period? I mean, was our goal, assuming we get the funding, to start construction next year, or would we have time to get the construction plans next year and out to bid and that type of thing for work next year?
It'd probably be tight if we're sliding till April just with this phase of the design. I'm guessing it'd be a few more months. It'd be, we still haven't got to the permitting phase, so you're probably going to miss 15. But it's going to be tight to hit 15 anyway.
And so if I'm looking at the CFP project sheet, it looks like we have about $400,000 or $500,000 of current capital facility funds or impact fees as a revenue source for that. And we don't have any additional funds yet. We're looking for funds. Hopefully the bond issue will help with that. But until we have those additional funds, we would do the schematic design phase, and things would kind of stop until we know where our funding's coming from that standpoint. Do we know the status of the RCO grants? Did you hear anything at all?
I did not hear anything today. We did apply for a development grant with RCO, and they were supposed to do the evaluation last week, and we should be hearing this week if we're on the short list.
Okay. Okay, that was my questions for now.
Great. Anyone else? Councilmember Lamb.
So, Pat, with respect to the parking, what portion of that, just the parking alone, would be on the construction side is our current estimate? Just to kind of replace the parking that we lost right now.
Correct. So the parking we lost was the east parking lot was reduced, and so the new parking goes to the west side. Plus, it would ultimately replace the paved parking lot that we have in the park.
That's still there.
That's
right.
still there, right?
Okay.
That'd be in a future phase of development that parking lot.
But so what would that? Do we need this design to get moving on that to replace? 'Cause I'm concerned that if we open this up and the park is going to be is open. I mean, the road is open. If we don't have some additional parking, what would be the portion of just that?
So we're accommodating the day-to-day visitors now in the park without any difficulty with the parking that we have.
Okay.
What it restricts us from doing is bringing the events back until
Right.
we have adequate parking. And even then, we're not going to have parking to accommodate all the visitors to the park if we have music in the park or the 4th of July. But it's difficult without at least a little bit more.
But would we not be able to construct the parking that's let's say that we prioritize that over other amenities, because we don't know how funding is going to be. Do we require this design and bid to be able to do that parking?
Yes.
See, I'd be concerned about delaying that, pushing that out, because I think it's going to limit our access to that. And I think that I've heard from a lot of people that they want to get the concert in the park back in the park at Bothell Landing now that the road is open. So my sense is if we could front load some of the work on that, I mean, so what is the ultimate cost? What is our estimate right now of the cost just of that parking portion?
I don't know if I have that with me. Can you shoot that from your head?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's all that I have right now.
Councilmember Sandberg.
I had a follow-up question on what Councilmember Evans said. So, in asking what would happen if we delayed decision on this or delayed action on this until after the November election? The concern is, would we delay the construction schedule into 2015? And I thought I heard you say it would slide a few months and it would be tight to hit it to even get the 2015 to meet the 2015 construction schedule, even if it was approved today. Did I hear it correctly on that?
Correct.
And then, so speaking to Councilmember Lamb's concern, So we might not be able to have a full build-out construction schedule for 2015, but would we be able to, if we delayed a vote till November, so delayed a couple months, would we be able to start construction on some of the key components for 2015, like the parking lot, and then you would pick up the rest of the construction in the following year?
I guess it's a sequencing issue as far as getting the storm and the utilities and all that in. So how much of that we could do the parking lot versus the rest of it, I don't really have a clear answer for you at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any further comments or questions?
I'd move the recommended action, and I'd like to speak to my motion.
Second.
So I appreciate the questions that have been raised tonight, and I appreciate the concern about spending money prior to the determination of the parks bond. What I've heard, though, from a lot of citizens is that we've seen a lot of private development in our downtown, and we've seen a lot of new construction. The park at Bothell Landing really, I think, is at the heart of the revitalization of our downtown. It's something that speaks to every person in this community. And I think that it's important, regardless of the outcome of the bond measure, to move forward with at least some elements of this. And I don't want to see us delay that. I want to see this coming summer be the summer that we return the concert in the park back to the park at Bothell Landing. And I think it's inadequate with the parking that we have right now with just the old lot. So I will support this motion moving forward. It's one of the reasons I'm supporting also the bond measure that's going forward, because I think it's important that we invest in the parts of our community that are really lasting and will have a really beautiful space. People connect with the park at Bothell Landing, and I think it's important that we move forward now. I'm not convinced necessarily that a 2-month delay will save us on the construction schedule, but I am pretty convinced that if we do push it out 2 months, that we're not going to make it for next year, and that's a risk that I don't want to take. So I will be supporting the motion.
Councilmember Sandberg.
I'd like to make an amending motion, and that is to move decision on this action to a date certain, November 11th.
We don't have a meeting on November 11th.
Oh, then the following meeting, November 18th? Is that?
I think it is the 18th. You're right, because then we move the meeting from the 11th to the 25th because Veterans Day is on the 11th.
That's right, November 18th.
Okay, so November 18th.
I'll second the amendment, but I think you wanted to make a motion to a date
yeah.
certain, not an amending
Oh, it's
motion.
not an amending motion.
It would be an amending motion because there's already a motion on the floor. So the motion would be to pass this as written. You would like to delay that vote to November 18th.
Yes. May I speak to my motion?
Yes.
Okay. I don't disagree with anything that Councilmember Lamb has said. I agree that it's important to move forward with the park at Bothell Landing. But what I'm concerned is that we spend $168,000 on this design before knowing the outcome of the bond election. And if the bond should fail, then we have spent $168,000 to design the park and get cost estimates that are going to go stale over time, just like the 2010 master plan estimates went stale and now have to be revisited. And so when I talked to Pat Parkhurst today, I specifically asked if we were to push out this decision to November, would it have a significant impact? And based on that conversation, I don't feel like it does have a significant impact. I feel like it would be tight. I think it's going to be tight either way to make that construction window, but I think it's still doable. And I think it's prudent, a prudent use of that $168,000 to make sure that we have the funding available to us through the passage of the bond. Because if the bond doesn't pass, then I would still like to have the same conversation, but have a more informed conversation about how we can spend that $168,000 to design what we can get in the near term. And so I don't see any harm in delaying the decision after the bond election. I don't feel that it is any statement on our part that does not support the development of the park or the bond issue. I think it's just a prudent use of that $168,000 to wait until we know that the bond is approved. And if it is, then great. It's an easy decision to move forward. And if it's not, then we are tailoring that expenditure so that we can get the most development for the money that we will have on hand to complete the park or to put elements in the park that are most important to us.
Great, thanks. And point of clarification with our city attorney, the amendment is a motion or amendment to table the vote. How should it be stated?
It's not an amending motion as such. It's wasn't stated that way, but in essence, it's a motion to table and to a date specific.
So it's still appropriate, even though there is a motion on
Yeah, it's a higher. It takes precedence.
Wow.
To move to table.
Nice. Councilmember Rayam, do you have some comments? No? Anyone else? Councilmember Evans?
So is the motion on the floor to table the item?
Yes.
Well, is a table non-debatable?
I believe you're correct, but I have to double check that.
Let's just take a moment then.
Yeah, because
Well then,
I had some comments, but that was my understanding. If it's a table, it's non-debatable, and you
You're
vote.
correct. I checked my handy-dandy cheat sheet, and it is not.
although as a point of parliamentary procedure, it's already been debated.
It has, and so it's
Well, I
up
haven't.
to the body to decide the rules of this particular motion, and by allowing debate, you have allowed
So
debate.
the motion wasn't originally stated as a table, so maybe that's part of the confusion. So
The confusion's understandable.
since we've already had some conversation, I think it's fair for everybody to have an opportunity to speak on the table, and then we would just go to a vote. So one person has had the opportunity. Councilmember Evans?
Well, I certainly support this project, as I think the majority of the council does. We all think the Park of Bothell Landing is a key project in our downtown development, and I want to see it happen. I wanted to see it happen long before now. I want to see it happen very soon. I don't know, having done this type of development and things, I'm not sure a couple months makes a difference. That's one issue, and then looking, and I don't know if I can address, but in general, the original motion, we don't have enough money, at least in my mind, to build parking lots. The $400,000 we have is not enough. So regardless of what happens with the bond issue, we're going to have to come forward and build more parking somehow if we're going to move those events back there. And it's interesting, having attended some of those Music in the Park series, I'll tell you, that venue down in the athletic field is a great venue, I think. And obviously the downtown one is too. And they both bring things to the table that are good. So I struggle with what is the best location. They both have advantages. It's so nice to be able to see families down there at the field, being able to run around and throw the Frisbee and do things, and not so tight in a venue as we are at the Park of Bothell Landing. The Park of Bothell Landing, great because it's part of the downtown development. Anyway, kind of a different, off the subject a little bit, but I will be voting against the table because I have another proposal that I would like to bring forward, and but I see merits in both of the previous comments or the comments that were made. I have some concerns, but at this point I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb? Any comments or no? Okay, so we'll go straight to the vote. A yes vote would be to table the vote until November 18th. No would be to go back to the main motion for discussion. So fails 3-2 with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. So you had the table, or not the table, I guess you had the floor with your amendment. Would you like to make any further comment on the underlying motion, which was to move forward with the recommended action?
Well, if this is going to be pending Councilmember Evans, his amending motion, so my comments might change. But if the vote is going to be on the underlying motion, I'm going to be voting against it. And again, not because I don't think the park at Bothell Landing is a jewel in our downtown, and not because I don't support its development. I want to most prudently use and best use that $168,000. And I feel like we won't have that kind of information until we have the election results for the bond, because we do have just a precious little amount of money in the capital facilities plan. We have $100,000 budgeted for this year and $400,000 for next year. And if we have to make do with that, I'd like to make sure that the design and the construction money is as focused as it can be and needs to be. And so I want to be cautious and wait till I know the outcome of that vote before dedicating expenditure to the project.
Great.
But I would be making an expenditure to this project regardless, coming November 18th, because it is that important to me.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Evans, would you like to have the floor?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve a contract with limitations, and that limitation would be that we proceed only with updating the cost estimate of the master plan at this point. That we don't proceed any further. I don't know how long it's going to take them to do that work, but potentially that could bring us to November some point. They would then come back, or that updated cost estimate would come back to us. We would know what a current up-to-date cost of our master plan would be, and then regardless of what happens with a bond issue, we then have a document in front of us that says, here's how much you're going to need to do for the various elements, and we would go and look for that. I guess so it's I'm somewhere in between the table and the original motion, in that I want to proceed with the project because we all believe it's an important project, but I want to limit how we proceed at this point so that we don't waste funding that we can use later on. I think, but updating the master plan, and I don't know if there's any other elements that the consultant could do at this phase to that wouldn't be wasted work somewhere down the road.
So I'll second the motion. If I can restate what I think it is,
Sure.
It'd be is it to direct staff to execute this contract with the limitation that the portion of devoted to the work between now and November be exclusively on updating the current cost estimate for the master plan?
I would limit the expenditures until November in relation to just updating the cost of the master plan.
So is what I stated what you? Because I was trying to get the motion. So my motion is that you're approving the contract but limiting the expenditures until November.
Correct. And then,
to only refreshing the.
And to bring back that cost estimate to us in November so that we have a better understanding of what the costs are going to be of parking lots or restrooms or whatever.
Mr. Mayor, can I make I mean, I know we don't typically do this in debate, but can I make an inquiry of staff on that point?
Sure.
Pat, is that something that is, I just seconded the motion because I hope it's something that's doable. Is that something that's doable?
I don't think it is.
I would say it's doable to update the master plan. My concern is that we haven't done a lot of design work, so there still could be changes between the master plan and design. We haven't settled on materials and formal design. So we would get newer numbers, but that's not going to be the end of cost estimating.
So your concern is that for the portion, that front portion, that if we update the master plan without doing any design work, that the numbers aren't going to be that useful?
They aren't going to be final.
Okay, so my understanding of your motion, if I look and simplify it as easy as the first 4 bullet points on the front page, Councilmember Evans, is there's finalizing schematic design. You would like that currently withdrawn until after November. You're okay with preparing cost estimates, but then developing construction drawings and clarifying necessary permits would not be included in work prior to November 11th or the vote. Is that right?
Well, that's a pretty broad characterization. If you go back to the detailed scope of work back here, starting on pages, it's attachment to the contract. I guess I look at this contract is for schematic design, which I'm not saying we move forward into schematic design at this point. Then it goes on and talks about what's involved in that, who does what. The majority of the work would be towards the master plan, park improvements. But what I look to, that would hold off, I mean, some of the meetings that are covered under the project management, I don't know if you would need any of those to do some work as far as updating the master plan. But where the fountain, we wouldn't be doing any schematic design on the fountain, so the fountain's going to be what it's in the scope of work. But what I was referring to, if you look under item 4, John Langer Consulting.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 63.
Okay.
Where it clearly states the scope of cost estimating is to include cost control review existing estimate from master plan as the baseline, and then update estimate for entire park in phase 1 scope of the bond issue. So even if that was done, realizing that that doesn't include design work and things, but it's an estimate, gives us a better estimate of what we're at and what we're looking for as far as funding for the project. I'm just trying to limit those expenses up front in the contract until we know a little bit better where we're at and what funding we have is my concern.
And what would your definition be of the project? What is our spec sheet, I guess, that they would be doing their cost estimate off of?
They would be taking the existing cost estimate for the master plan and updating that to current costs.
Updating that.
Right.
Based upon our prior assumptions.
Right. Now, if there's some things we know about that park now that we've gained along the way that they could add into that, realizing we don't have design, but they know that. I have a question of the number of restrooms that we have in the park. I think we got far more restrooms than we need. They're a very expensive facility. Potential vandal issues. The lighting was a question I had in my mind. I'm just thinking that we don't know. If we were to move forward with the first motion, we don't know how much it's going to cost to do the parking lots. And my gut feeling is $400,000, which we currently have, isn't going to do the parking lots. So how much is it going to be?
So, are you clear on the second of which you've made?
So I think so, but I just want to restate it to make sure because it was a long motion, and I think we just want to be really precise about what we're voting on. So as I understand it, you're directing staff to move forward on essentially bullet 4, which is to update the cost estimate for the park master plan, which would include the front portion, and that's the work that would be the only work that would be done prior to the early part of November. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless there were some minor things that the staff would know that's going to happen to go in there. I don't know. I understand that's difficult to not give them a specific scope of work. So if we limit it to the cost estimate, that's fine.
I mean, I think incumbent in the cost estimate is that they would need to have some direction as to what's going to be included. I mean, I think they have to have some interaction. To me, that would be implicit in the motion. But in your motion is that there's some work that they have to do. They can't just say, "Here's a set of plans. Give us a new number." I mean, there's some back and forth on that. So,
okay. So
right.
I just need a clear motion of what you two are deciding on so we can move forward in conversation, because it's not possible for staff to come back and there's no exact amount that's attributed toward bullet point number 4 from my knowledge. Is there, Pat? Is it 35,000?
I think if you go to the back,
Yeah, there is.
his costs are, there's a chart.
Yes, they're very small.
Yeah.
The numbers or the chart?
The chart. I'm sure the numbers are large.
I mean, as I understand it, the motion is to direct staff to execute a contract with the Portico Group to prepare cost estimates for the master plan of the park at Buffalo Landing.
That's correct. You could go to page 68 in the packet, which is a letter from Langer Consulting on, it states exactly what they would do, and that's what I would recommend that we authorize at this time.
And the estimated budget for the scope of work is $3,240.
Okay. All right.
With hourly rate of $135. Okay, so I have a motion and a second motion by...
An amending motion, yeah.
Yeah, amending motion. So I'll speak to the amending motion, unless you were going to do so first.
Can I just get a clarification
Yeah.
about the amending motion? So, just real quick, so the rest of the contract, though, would that be an optional piece of the contract? Because if we execute the full contract, then the full contract is executed. So would we just say, okay, the first part is doable, and then everything else is optional, depending on the city's judgment or something like that?
Phase one of the contract is the cost estimating, and then they would come back to us with the rest of the contract that we would approve. We would only approve whatever you want to call it, phase one or the cost estimating at this point. Then they would come back with that information in November, and we'd either authorize the rest of the contract or the next phase or whatever the case may be.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks.
And you have a clarifying question as well, Sandberg?
Clarifying question. So you're referencing on page 68 of the agenda packet this letter from the Portico Group?
Yes.
And it says, Dear Joanna, we'll do all these things for schematic design, cost estimating services for $3,240. And this memo, I don't know if this is still applicable. This memo is May 2nd, 2013. So is your amending motion to just spend $3,240 as provided in this May 2nd, 2013 memo?
No.
And Pat has mentioned that it's actually May 2nd, 2014. It was just a Scrivener's error from
Okay.
Sender.
So is that your amending? To spend
No.
so of the $168,000
No.
that is before us as the action, you only want to spend the $3,240 as provided for in this May 2nd, 2014 letter.
I only want to do the cost estimating on the project.
You didn't say you were capping it at 3.
Well,
And
that's the
that's-
cost
That's
of
the
that.
budget.
That's the cost estimate.
That's the cost of the cost estimate to
And
do
is
that.
that?
But that's
that-
not, point of information, that's not prescriptive in his motion. He just said he wanted to do the cost estimate. If it costs $4,000 or if it costs $2,000, it's not prescriptive as to that. He was asked a clarifying question of what portion of that do you think it is, and he cited page 68. That wasn't in his motion. That was in his response to a question.
Well, my understanding is the budget amount in the proposal totaling the $168,914. Of that amount, $3,240 is the expense to do that cost estimate. So by nature of his amendment, that would be the amount attributed toward this exercise, unless Pat has any clarification on that matter.
Can I ask the staff?
Just quick clarification, Pat, is that
If I
correct?
clarify, that was John Langer's price, but the overarching Portico Group is managing the project, so there's going to be costs for
something
them.
for them.
We're not entering in a contract with John Langer, it's with Portico.
Oh, okay, so we really don't have the full cost estimate. Bill, what's your question?
So that's fine. If there's some additional work that comes in, that's what the primary focus of the work I see being done. If there's some things, Portico Group has some input into that or oversight, that's fine. But let's get the costs to know where we're at and then go from there. And
Okay.
I don't know if is that enough information for the staff, or do we need to define it more clear as to limit the amount of money? I don't know if that's what we want to do, but
Can I speak to the amending motion?
I'd like to first, and then you can jump in. As the amending motion is currently crafted, I will be voting against. It's like me going out and asking somebody to give me an estimate on what it's going to cost to build a car, and then sending them out and spending $6,000 to do so. They're going to say, what kind of car? Is it 4 wheels? Is it 5 wheels? Is it a Lamborghini, or is it a Vita Bug? We don't have enough information. We already did a rough estimate. Why re-up our unfulfilled estimate priorly? If we know that we're going to move forward in one fashion or the other as a city over the next coming years, whether the bond passes or not, that's the car. Yeah, which it's a really rough drawing, and it's on a flat piece of paper and not 3D with square footage of the buildings that are exactly accurate. I'd like to come to a more finalized schematic design to understand what we are building. Then we can have a better understanding of our cost estimate. When I'm building a house, I got to fully design it first before I can do an estimate. Just making a rough square footage estimate is not going to get me an accurate business plan. So I feel it's upon us as a city to come up with that accurate business plan and then put behind it cost estimates. And if the bond measure doesn't pass, then we have the opportunity to go further in pieces to put together what our full plan is. And Councilmember Evans, I rely on you a lot because of your experience and your lifetime commitment to parks. And so for this, I'm listening to you a lot, but I have to just take a different approach, and I just want to see a full plan first, knowing that the park, to me, is one of the most important, if not the most important, part of the revitalization of downtown, because it's where the public is going to interact with their investment in the city. So I want to see a design come forward that we can then go forward with understanding of costs, and then if we have to go in pieces to put it together, first parking lot, then a bathroom, and then what other facilities will be there, then so be it. So I will be voting against the amendment because I'd like to see the full plan analyzed, so given any outcome in November, we can then take a direction on how to move forward. Councilmember Lamb, speak your second.
Yeah, so I'll be supporting this as a compromise, and I think it's important when we compromise on things that we go ahead and support the main motion. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be supporting this. I agree with the mayor. I don't disagree with anything he said. I would prefer to see us go forward with this. I think I would prefer us to go down and put our marker on the Park at Bothell Landing. I think it's extremely important. I wasn't privy to other conversations with Ms. Parkhurst, but what I heard her say tonight is that it would damage our schedule, that it would damage our ability to reopen the parts of the park that people really value and access, including having the concert at the park there, if we delay this for a period of time. So I'm not in favor of delaying it. I take Councilmember Evans' point, and I'm willing to support this compromise because I think it allows us to get started and hopefully get moving, but not spend the bulk of the money, which I understand his restraint. I understand the other arguments that were made tonight. So I will be supporting this compromise.
Anyone else? No? Councilmember Evans? No? So the vote is an amendment to limit the scope to preparing cost estimates based upon a prior cost estimate that we had for our rough schematic sketch. Everybody can place their vote. And if the clerk can display. Fails, no, it passes 3-2, sorry, with Councilmember Sandberg and Mayor Freed in the negative, with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. So the underlying motion has been amended to limit work to preparing cost estimates. Any further discussion on the underlying motion? We do. So there are no further comments, so if we can vote on the underlying motion, would be to move forward with preparing cost estimates based upon the sketch in our packet. If clerk can clear, and then everybody can replace their vote, and a clerk can display. It passes yet again the underlying motion with Councilmember Rayum, Lamb, and Evans in favor, Councilmember Sandberg and Freed opposed, and Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. So that ends the conversation on that. Pat, thank you so much for coming this evening. We look forward to seeing you again in November, if not sooner. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Jamie Marston regarding considering approval of a collective bargaining agreement with Bothell Police Officers Guild for the period of January 1st, 2014 through December 31st, 2016. Ms. Marston, nice to see you.
Thank you, and good evening. Last fall, the city and Bothell police officers began negotiations for a collective bargaining agreement, and that negotiations ended in mediation, but we did reach a tentative agreement on July 25th. The Guild ratified that proposed agreement on August the 18th, and it is before you this evening, Council, for consideration and approval. It's a 3-year contract lasting from January 1st, 2014 through December 31st of 2016. Prior to negotiations, data was gathered with from Western Washington cities. Those included in King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County, whose population and assessed valuation were between 50 and 150% of the city of Bothell. That data was taken to examine how our police officers were compensated, total compensation in regard to the market that was surveyed. The data indicated that our police officers were being paid less than 50th percentile of the surveyed market. There are 2 major changes in this contract. First one is a switch to a lower cost medical plan, a high deductible medical plan, with an increase to the associated health reimbursement arrangement for those employees with dependents. The second major change is our market adjustments to bring the total compensation for the police officers to mid-market. The cost of this proposed contract in 2014 is $104,500. That was anticipated in the 2013-2014 budget. The cost of the COLA and market adjustments in 2015, with including fully loaded, $215,000. There is an anticipated decrease to the health insurance cost of $160,000 based upon the switch to the lower cost medical plan. Staff is recommending approval of this contract, and I am here to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much. Anybody have questions for Ms. Marston? Councilmember Lamb, do you? No? Councilmember Evans? All right, seeing none, is there a motion?
I'd like to move the recommended action, and I'll speak to my motion. If there's a second.
Great, Councilmember Lamb.
Jamie, thank you so much for your work on this. I really appreciate the time that you spent on this and working and bargaining in good faith with our police officers. This is a really, we have a great department here in Bothell. We have great leadership of our department, and we have, I think we've worked really, really hard to make sure that our officers are well compensated and fairly compensated. And I think you've done a great job of balancing the needs of the taxpayers to have a fair contract and to make sure that the men and women who protect us every single day are taken care of. So thanks for your work on that. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Any other comments? No. All right. A vote on the recommended action. If everybody could place their vote, and the clerk can display. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Thank you, Jamie. Nice to see you. Next item on our agenda is AB 14-124 to consider adoption of a resolution setting a public hearing for October 7th, 2014 to vacate a portion of Rogers Street. We have Attorney Joe Beck with us. Nice to see you, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I am presenting 2 consecutive resolutions tonight, both vacating or seeking to set a hearing for vacating 2 different small segments of street. If you have, and there may be some questions I can't answer, and Steve Morikawa is here to help me out with some of those, so I may call on him. But I would start by saying that I'm going to address both of these items generally, and then we can talk about each one. You can adopt or choose to adopt or not adopt them separately. The process for vacating platted streets is set out in RCW and in our own code. And the process is first we come to you and ask for a public hearing. And council sets a public hearing, and then we will come back in about a month before you for an opportunity to have this heard, public testimony, and also we'll have that time period to answer any of your questions in the meantime, and more fully vet this at the public hearing. So this is not the last touch that you will have of this. But basically what we're doing here is the city acquired the old SR 522 right-of-way as part of the realignment by trading the new alignment to the state for the old alignment, at least in part. This property then needs to be divided up in a way that can be conveyed. Just according to the law, we have to be able to convey property. It has to be divided in the correct process. And so what we're doing to divide this property is the process of a boundary line adjustment, which is processed through our planning department, and Director Weislogel is working on those along with his staff right now. But in order to do the boundary line adjustments, we actually have to vacate streets that would bisect lines and prohibit us from combining parcels into multiple pieces into single parcels. So that's all we're doing here. With regard to Rogers Street, it has never been opened. It's never been utilized as a street, at least in the research that I could find. It was originally platted quite a while ago, back in the early 1900s, 1919. And then the other item, the second agenda bill, 14125, deals with what was originally Wilson Avenue and is now referred to as Northeast 180th Street. And again, that is a piece of a roadway, small piece of roadway that is no longer being used as a roadway, and again, needs to be vacated in order to redivide the property into proper parcels that can be marketed on behalf of the city. So what we're recommending and asking tonight is that according to our, following our own code and RCW, that you vote to adopt a resolution that will set a public hearing for October 7th, 2014, at which point the vacation of Rogers Street for the first item and the vacation of Wilson Avenue, or portion of Wilson Avenue, for the second item before you tonight would be considered at that time and that date. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
Great, thank you. So we kind of took them up together. Councilmember Sandberg had requested 5 additional minutes to discuss Wilson. Maybe we can ask questions collectively, but then when we go to a motion, we'll take one and then the second. Does that sound good? Would you like to jump in with your questions, Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes, thank you. So with regards to Wilson Avenue, I was curious, where is Wilson in regards to the surplus Block A? Is it, because when I was, it's kind of hard to tell when you look at the maps. I mean, clearly Rogers Street is in the middle of lots E, F, and G, and that's pretty easy to understand. But this Wilson Avenue, I wasn't sure if we're vacating it and it becomes a part of the park at Bothell Landing, or we're vacating it so that it can be conveyed along with Block A. And then I was trying to look at one of our downtown maps that shows all of the surplus blocks, and I just wanted to make sure that I understood who had the ownership of that little tiny triangle right above the yellow Wilson Ave.
So the city of Bothell has the ownership of the little tiny triangle above the yellow area. So this area right here. This area right here. So that will become part of the park, and in fact, Horse Creek kind of comes through that area over there. Lot A, which is the former Bike and Ski, the 116th Place, the used car auto lot, and Tina's Nails is over here. So part of that is part of the new highway, so that also becomes part of the boundary line adjustment because it becomes smaller parcels, and we're going to aggregate it into one. But the yellow piece that we're vacating does not get attached to that. It actually gets attached to the park. It's going to be a separate parcel, but that parcel is part of the park. The park itself currently has several parcels that make up the park at Bothell Landing. It's not just one big parcel.
So I guess, so when I asked Joe earlier, because when you look at Rogers Street, there's an extension of Rogers Street that goes into the park at Bothell Landing. And we don't have to vacate that because it's just becoming a park at Bothell Landing. We're not trying to convey it. So I guess I'm confused. I thought with the Wilson vacation, we were going through that process to try and convey it as a part of Block A. But we're not. It's just going to become a part of the park at Bothell Landing?
That's correct, but you'll notice that if we didn't vacate it, you would have a tiny little piece that would be cut off from the rest of the park. So to include that tiny little piece in some larger parcel that is part of the park, we have to vacate the intervening street because it unnaturally, I guess you could say, cuts that off.
Okay.
So that's the reason for doing that as far as...
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ram, Evans, Lamb. Any further questions? No. If anybody wants to make a motion,
I'd move the recommended action
on item 14-124.
Second.
Councilmember Lamb, any conversation on item 14-124? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote, and the vote would be for the recommended action to adopt a proposed resolution setting a public hearing for October 7, 2014 to vacate a portion of Rogers Street. If everybody could place their vote, clerk can display. It passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. The second item, is there a motion?
So moved.
Councilmember Lamb has made a motion and a second by Councilmember Evans. Any discussion? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote, and a clerk could display. One more time. This, again, is to schedule for October 7th. And so we'll ask everybody to vote verbally, adopt the proposed resolution setting a public hearing for October 7th, 2014 to consider vacation of a portion of Northeast 180th Street. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Thank you so much, Joe, for your presentation. We look forward to seeing those back on October 7th. Next item on our agenda is AB 14-126 to consider adoption of proposed ordinance authorizing utility revenue bonds. And Tammy Shackman, our finance director, is here. Nice to see you, Tammy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, our utilities have basically funded themselves 100% on a pay-as-you-go philosophy for many decades. There was a Public Works Trust Fund loan that the city took advantage of back in the 1990s, which will actually mature in 2017, I believe. What is happening now is that in 2012, the council adopted a capital facilities plan that included some important utility projects that have to do with the downtown revitalization, mainly being Horse Creek, as well as refurbishing 2 lift stations for the sewer fund. Because of that, our initial thought was that we would apply again for a Public Works Trust Fund loan in order to fund those projects. Public Works Trust Fund loans usually carry an administration fee of about 0.5%. So those are very, very beneficial to the city. Basically, there's very little interest involved or administration costs. That option was taken away from us when the state took those monies out of that fund and sent them elsewhere. So the city then had to determine another funding source for these vital utility projects. In doing so, I came to you earlier this year and asked you to authorize the combining of our 3 utility funds, and that was done in anticipation of a revenue bond issue that I would be bringing you later in the year. In anticipation of the revenue bond, we always look at our projects and determine how spending is going to take place. Spending on these projects, because they're large, takes place over many months. So we don't issue the bonds normally until after the project gets started, so we can have as little financing costs associated with the debt as possible, and that is what has happened in this instance. We came back in earlier this year and asked for authorization of the combining of the utilities, as well as bringing forth the contracts for Horse Creek, Penn Park Reserve or Reservoir. And so those contracts have already been authorized by the council, and now we're coming forward and asking to actually issue the bonds. So that is what I'm bringing you tonight, is an ordinance that authorizes the city to issue the bonds associated with these projects, which amount to approximately $17.5 million. Again, the majority of that cost is within the storm water fund, which includes the Horse Creek project and also includes a interfund loan repayment to the city's asset replacement fund that had to do with the ops center. The storms portion of that building. We anticipated this revenue bond or the Public Works Trust Fund loan years before and decided we only wanted to issue debt once. Because there are administrative costs associated with that. And so an interfund loan was taken out from the asset replacement fund for the storms portion of the ops center. They've paid most of that back. I believe they owe about $1.5 million. If you look at our CAFR, you actually will see the asset and the liability, and so the funds actually net out where they should be. So that's where we're at on that. But tonight, in addition to the bond issue, I'm also asking for authorization for the city manager to sign the engagement letter with the bond council, which is just a normal process that usually takes place at the beginning of this process instead of the end. But unfortunately, our engagement letter, past engagement letter was coming to a close, so we're adding that tonight. Do any of the council have questions pertaining to the bond issue, the engagement letter, the interfund loan, or any of the projects associated with this debt issue?
Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. So, what are we estimating the interest rates are going to be on these bonds?
Probably about 4%.
About 4%. So we had a Public Works Trust Fund loan at 0.5%, and now we're up to 4%. That's unfortunate, but that's what happened. And these are revenue bonds, and the annual debt service will be paid from utility fees.
Absolutely,
is the source
yes.
of funding for this.
And although we are combining the utilities for bonding purposes to give us a higher level of assets and greater generation of revenues to repay the debt issue, for credit rating purposes, each one of the funds, although combined for this purpose, still have to pay back their own portion of the debt. There's no combining of obligation or liability.
will this issue consider rate increases or require rate increases in any way?
The rate increases were already established at the beginning of the year and are in
So those
yes.
the rates that are in place now are adequate to cover this bond, okay? One other last question. We've talked off and on about the potential of our water utility being sold off or coordinated with Alderwood Water District. And I noticed on page 166 here, the third bullet down talks about, these are just revenue bond structure, talks about that, and to refrain from selling utilities unless debt service is provided for. So if and when that option ever came up again, that is still a possibility as long as we would provide for the debt service. Somehow that would be provided for here.
Yeah, it would be included in the cost or the selling price of the utility. I do want to address that very quickly, though. That was looked at as to whether or not it would be beneficial for the city to head in that direction, and I think I'm going to defer that to the Public Works Director, but I think every time we bring this up, and staff get worried, so I'd like to have her respond to that.
Well, and I know what the staff response is. We talked before about this, and I don't disagree with that response, but I always just, want to be aware of what the options may be in the future. It sounds like at this point we're better off to keep our water utility. But again, there's pros and cons to that too. So,
things
but at
can
this
change.
point, we've made that decision to stay where we're at, and that's fine. I just don't want to limit any possibilities or opportunities for us in the future, if anything comes up. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments with the council? Questions, rather. Councilmember Sandberg.
What will be the estimated annual debt service on this?
I'm going to check in with the financial advisor for 1.2 million, but that gets allocated over the three funds. Again, the majority of that goes towards the storm drain, Horse Creek, and the interfund loan repayment.
And then you said that the rates that are in place currently are adequate to cover this bond.
That is correct. Yes, the whole plan, the debt issue, the projects, how we were going to go about it. That was all part of the capital facilities plan that was adopted back in October of 2012. So it all fits together, piece by piece. It comes to the council piecemeal. That's just inherently part of the process.
So I see on November 18th we have a public hearing to consider adoption of ordinances establishing new user rates for utility services. So not any big surprises as a result of this bond issue.
Well, I think the city has always been very conservative, and I don't think that I would anticipate any big increases. I think you do see a normal increase of just cost of providing the services, that type of thing, but there certainly won't be anything that will surprise you.
And then on page 166, there's discussion of covenants. Can you talk about what these covenants or promises are? Are they typical, and how much we have to make an account for a debt service fund and then a debt service reserve account? If you could speak to that and what kind of money we're talking about.
The covenants are just covenants that we are agreeing to within the ordinance and to acknowledge our accountability and our responsibility. So that is probably the difference between if it was a GO bond, where it would be, the future revenues of the city taxation-wise. In this situation, we basically are making covenants that we will do the various things that are listed. All of them pertain to paying back the debt and meeting our obligations. So they're pretty straightforward as far as what our responsibility is, and nothing is out of the ordinary or extraordinary within this document.
And if the project costs add up to about 17.5 million, why are we borrowing 21?
Well, actually, the 21 is just a maximum number. We won't know what that number is until we actually issue the debt, which will happen later this month. And then we'll actually know what it costs to issue, what it'll cost with the interest in that.
So that difference between 17.5 million, which are the project costs, and 21 million, which is what's stated on the face, is...
I'm going to have Susan Musselman speak to that. Okay. She's the city's financial advisor.
Thanks.
Good evening. When we put the number in an ordinance like this, we try to put it large enough to ensure that we can meet your goals, which is to raise $17.5 million for the project. Additionally, we need to raise funds to pay costs of issuance and to fund that debt service reserve fund that was one of the covenants. And that debt service reserve fund is about it's about $1.4 million. When the bonds are sold, I don't want to confuse you with this part, but sometimes bonds are sold at a premium or a discount, so you don't always sell them at face value. So in order to get the $17.5 million you need, plus the amount you need for cost of issuance, plus the amount you need for a debt service reserve fund, that may add up to more than the 17.5.
Okay. All right, thanks. And then...
that is why I had her explain it.
And then on page 169 of the agenda bill, there's a section B that says... I mean, it read to me like we couldn't issue any more debt. I don't know. It says the city currently has no outstanding debt secured by the revenues of its combined utility or any component utility that is senior to its outstanding subordinate debt. And then something about not allowing the city to issue further debt. What does that mean?
So the bonds are being issued as what we call senior lien debt, so they have the highest lien. Debt such as your Public Works Trust Fund loans are subordinate lien debt. Right now, the only thing you have outstanding are subordinate lien bonds. When you issue first lien debt, you basically say to the bondholders or the investors who buy the bonds that you will not issue additional first lien bonds unless you meet specific conditions. If you meet those specific conditions, you can issue additional bonds that share that first lien.
And those are the covenants?
Yes, that's part of the covenants. And those are very ordinary in utility revenue bonds such as
so if we had an emergency, we could issue new
yes.
debt if we met the covenants.
Yes, and the covenants
of
are not onerous. They're
this first lien debt. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. And I'm sorry, I hate to get down to these nuts and bolts questions.
It's okay. I do too.
So it says on page 193 there is no remedy of acceleration. Does that mean we can't retire the bonds early? Or does that mean something else?
It's something slightly different. What it basically says is if you don't make a debt service payment in any year, that does not give the bond owners a right to call in the whole loan. They can only hold you accountable for each year's payment as you miss that payment, which we, of course, know won't happen.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
I
Great,
promise.
Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg.
So.
Any other questions? Councilmember Ram?
So on page 165 of the packet, it has the three different types of utility and the projects identified, and some of them are, I would guess, somewhat dependent on the levy passing. Like the Main Street enhancement, the multi-way boulevard phase 2, for the water fund, the $1.5 million. Oh, I'm sorry, sewer fund, and then the water fund has on there. Same thing, Main Street extension. So what happens, it's kind of like the same question we had about the parks. What happens if we don't do those projects? What if the levy doesn't pass?
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with the levy, and the projects are not dependent on the levy. The projects are the Horse Creek to open the channel, replacement of 2 lift stations, not replacement, refurbishment of 2 lift stations, and actually this debt is only paying for a portion of one. The Penn Park Reserve, acceleration of capital improvements. Oh, you're looking at the sewer projects, the portion of the sewer projects?
Like on page
For-
155, you have the 3 bullets, one for each.
Yeah, I have
utility.
different page numbers.
Oh, okay.
Just one sec, Tammy. What were you going to say?
Well, I just want to say, so it says, like you just said, lift station 2 and 3 improvements, promontory hillside sewer main replacement, and sewer capital improvements as identified in the April 2011 downtown revitalization study. And some of those road projects listed, like the Main Street extension, the multi-way boulevard phase 2, those are not funded at the moment, but they might be in November. So would we be pulling more debt than we need, I guess, or do we just pull the debt as needed? So let's say the levy passes. Would we wait to pull that debt for these utilities to pay their piece of those projects at that time, or do we just take it now?
We will be issuing. We've waited with the other projects, and now we will issue all the bonds at once pertaining to these projects. Within the ordinance, basically what it speaks to is that if something doesn't take place, that the monies have to be used for similar type projects. So, and the ordinance allows some flexibility, because sometimes a project, you can go out to bid and it ends up being less than what you anticipated, or so you have to be able to use those funds somehow because they have a specific purpose. So you always leave some flexibility within the ordinance to allow for things like that. Within the sewer fund, those dollars are, I believe, $1.5 million in total. So we're not talking about a huge amount of money. Given the projects that are included, there's quite a few different projects. So the amount that would be going towards any project that is has anything to do with the bonding would be really very, very small in comparison to the rest.
So we'd find other purposes for that.
I should say, not just other purposes, but other purposes that are similar to this and the purpose that is stated here. We can't just go off and do anything that we want. We have to go along with what we've provided within this document. So it would have to be something that is already in the capital facilities plan, already approved by council. We're very limited to what we can do, but we give ourselves as much flexibility as we can in order to utilize those dollars.
Okay, one more quick question is and I don't remember what page it was on, but it said something to the nature of utilities can borrow from each other to pay the debt off in between, like taking interloans from each other. And so I was wondering, is that the same case for the interest?
Yeah, the interest would apply to whoever is utilizing the money. That would be an extraordinary circumstance. It would be a situation where one of the funds was not able to make its debt service payment, and there was no ability, like within the covenants, to increase fees in order to bring in that money. It would basically be a situation where you, as a city, chose that result because you just would not increase the fees in order to make the payment.
But it would.
I mean, it would be a choice. You would either increase the utility fees in order to ensure that you could make that payment, or you would not.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any further questions?
I just have one really quick question, Tammy. of that $12.5 million, how much is for daylighting Horse Creek and how much is for the payments for the old Public Works facility?
$11 million?
Don Feen has joined the conversation.
I don't think we have the breakdown with this. You mean the portion that's
Just Horse Creek.
Yes.
down? That's
So there's $12.5 million. It's on page 2, I think, or maybe on page 1 of the packet, and it's broken down between of the total. I think $17.5 million. It's the Horse Creek improvement, the daylighting of Horse Creek, and then repayment or refinancing of some of the debt for the Public Works Operations Center. So I'm wondering what portion is which.
Yeah. So it's about $11 million, and then another $1.5 million for the loan or for the interfund loan repayment.
So it's $11 million for the daylighting of Horse Creek. Okay.
Definitely the majority.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Evans, any questions? Seeing no further questions, is there a motion for the recommended action?
So moved. Move that we adopt the ordinance for utility revenue bonds.
Okay, we have a motion. And currently no second. Well, Councilmember Rayhan was second. Any discussion?
I want to thank Tammy for her work on this. I want to thank all of our finance team and our public works team for the work that they've done to put this together. It is part of a process, and I think sometimes when people take pieces in isolation, it can be confusing, but this is something our city has planned very, very thoughtfully for a long time. I will say that it's, to me, the cost of Horse Creek is still troubling. The $11 million is something that is an enormous part of our budget, and we had to, as everyone knows, raise our rates to pay for that. Oftentimes there's been a lot of conversation about money being spent. We had a long conversation tonight about $160,000 being spent. This is $11 million, and it would be. It just seems like there's a lot of silence when money is spent for projects that some people like, and then there's a lot of criticism when there's projects that people don't like. This is a huge bill. It's one that we're doing. It's one that I didn't support daylighting it. I'm going to vote for this motion because it has to be done, and it's a responsible thing to do, but it's an enormous price tag, and it's one that's borne by the ratepayers of the city of Bothell. So thank you for your work. Thanks for making the best of this situation and for getting a good value for our taxpayers.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you, Tammy, for your hard work on this. I appreciate it. And I just feel like I need to respond to Councilmember Lamb's comments because I feel like they're directed at me. And we continually hear again and again how I am the cause and the source for the cost of Horse Creek daylighting. And I think that's an unfair characterization. I don't want to take the time to go into the history of that vote, except to say that, yeah, back in 2010 and 2011, when we were comparing the cost of a 2,000-foot baffled pipe design with a daylighted Horse Creek, there wasn't a big cost difference. And at that time, I voted for a daylighted Horse Creek, and I lost the vote. And that's the way it goes. But something happened in those ensuing years when I wasn't on council, and the decision was made to go forward with the daylighting of Horse Creek, whether it was a violation of state law or a violation of tribal treaties. We just couldn't go forward with that baffled design. And so we don't know how much that baffled design would have cost, the baffled design with a parallel pipe. We don't know what that cost was because we didn't go down that road. So I don't know when it's going to stop where I keep getting beat over the head that Horse Creek and its price tag is all my fault. But I guess we're going to continue to have this conversation because it keeps being brought up. And yes, I am painfully aware that this is a rate increase. I know this is a revenue bond and it doesn't affect the taxpayers, but it does affect ratepayers. And for most people, paying taxes and paying rates is the same thing. It's just money out of their pocket. But we're going to continue to have this conversation as it continues to be brought up.
Okay. I didn't hear Councilmember Lamb state you by name. So,
Because I didn't. That's why you didn't hear it.
You didn't have to state me by name. You could just state by the specific examples of the previous debate.
Great. So, Councilmember Rayam, any comments on the underlying motion? No? Councilmember Rivers? All right. Seeing no further comment, if everybody could place their vote, the motion was made by Councilmember Evans, second by Councilmember Rayam, to move with the adoption of the proposed ordinance authorizing utility revenue bonds and authorize the city manager to engage bond counsel as needed in order to issue the bonds. Everybody can place their vote. Wow, the clerk has displayed. It passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Tammy, thank you so much. Appreciate you and your leadership and your teams as well. As always, we were going to try to adjust another item before break, but seeing that it's 8:08, I think we'll wait to approach renaming Cougar Way, or Northeast 180th as Cougar Way when we get back. So we will return at 8:25 sharp. We're going to jump back into considering actually a new item, AB 14127, to consider designated portion of Northeast 180th Street as Cougar Way. Aaron Lionheart, our Public Works Director, nice to see you this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you as well. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Council's request, I've come with information about designating a portion of 180th Street between State Route 522 and 92nd Avenue, Cougar Way. Staff proposes to have signage similar to what we've used on historic streets, indicating Cougar Way in brown as not the official name, but as a historic or a honorary name, and then retaining Northeast 180th Street along the corridor as the official name of the street. We estimate a budget of about $3,500 to manufacture signs. About $1,900 of that would be to manufacture 6 signs for along the corridor. And then some funding for outside labor to put up the signs on State Route 522. And then city staff would do the installation of the smaller signs along the corridor. So if you have any further questions.
Great. Anybody questions? Councilmember Sandberg?
Trying to get an idea of the size of the sign. So the ones that are going to be on the overhead standards as you're driving on Bothell Way, are those the 2 feet by, is it 6 feet?
Yes. Yes, those would be on the state route.
And then, so we have some signs right now on the state route, and are they like 1 feet by 6 feet long?
I would anticipate that they are probably about 1.5 feet by 6 feet long. They're fairly large, larger than they look from the driving surface.
So they'd be comparable in size to what's on there now.
Yeah.
Just kind of double width to add on the historic name.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Well, I think the person who brought this up was Deputy Mayor Spivey, who is not here.
I know, and I'm disappointed that he doesn't get the opportunity to speak to it.
Is there anybody who'd like to make a motion this evening?
I'd move the recommended action.
Second.
So who gets the second? You both said it at the same time. Motion by Councilmember Lamb and second by Councilmember Sandberg. Any discussion under the motion?
Well, sure.
Okay.
I'd like to speak to it. I'm going to support this because I think it's a great way to show community spirit. And when I was looking at this, we didn't have really opportunity to deliberate. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to maybe share some other ideas, because I think that showing community spirit is, we have opportunities to do that in other areas of the city. And I had a conversation with the Chancellor and Kelly Snyder a couple weeks ago about how we can increase presence of the campus on Main Street. And we were talking about tonight even telling our story and creating a sense of place and a sense of community. And we were talking about how great it would be if we could have paw prints on Main Street, kind of like they do in Clemson. And, wouldn't it be great if we could do purple and gold and blue and white paw prints to denote the two campuses that we have, right in our midst. So, and then the other thing I was thinking about was when you have that historic signage, could we have something on the highway that is a directional sign that's in brown that says historic Main Street, with a direction, with an arrow pointing, again, as a way to create a sense of place and to provide meaningful direction. So I guess I'm going to vote yes on this motion, and I was hoping that maybe we can talk about extending this idea to creating that sense of community on Main Street in a couple of ways.
On a future agenda?
On a future agenda item.
Yeah. Okay. Any other further comments? Councilmember Evans?
Just quickly, do our wayfinding signs do any of what Councilmember Sandberg mentioned? It seemed like to me that there was one for historic Main Street or something. But
Yes, we do have signs that point to historic Main Street as well as the campus.
Yeah. Okay. So that may be a start. And
It is a start. Although when I was driving that way today, they're not as visual as something hanging over the highway. And actually, I was surprised when I was coming up on 180th Street. There was a sign that said it looked like turn left here to get to Main Street, and I thought, well, that's awful confusing for a directional sign. And I bring this up too because there's I've had some conversations with business owners on Main Street who say that people continue to have a hard time finding Main Street. And so when I saw that, and I thought, oh, that could hang over, if that's going to hang over the highway, that's really visible. And could we do the same thing, but with historic Main Street, pointing that way?
All right.
Anyway, just for a future agenda item.
So, do you want to speak to the underlying motion?
No, I'm in support of it.
Okay. Anyone else? No? If everybody wants to place their vote? And if the clerk can display, passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Thank you so much, Aaron. Next item on the agenda tonight is...
I'm sorry, point of order.
Yeah?
Would there be support from council to talk about applying this kind of signage method for Main Street?
I'll just speak for one, Councilmember. I think we had a pretty extensive wayfinding sign report that came out to us, which we've had some signage that flowed out of that. I'm happy to have an update on kind of where that project stands as part of, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and other ways how we can maximize signage for Main Street and things that we can do to think about moving forward in making our community and our college campus and our high school visible, and how that synergy can happen between the two.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe even a tour of downtown and all the new signs as a council. So next item on the agenda is AB 14128, and this is a public hearing on proposed miscellaneous downtown code amendments and consideration of proposed council findings, conclusions, and action, proposed ordinance approving the amendments, and a proposed resolution adding a public area use fee to the city fee resolution. Dave Boyd, our senior planner, is with us this evening. Good to see you, Dave.
Thank you, and good evening. So the first set of amendments that I have for you tonight are what we call the miscellaneous downtown code amendments. There are 4 different amendments included here. These were initiated as part of the 2013 planning docket. One is to revisit uses allowed in neighborhood center overlays. 2 is to modify regulations to remove impediments for sidewalk cafes and other appropriate sidewalk uses. 3 is to clarify the kinds of parking reductions available for the central downtown districts. And 4 is to adjust the requirement that windows have a 3-inch inset from the face of cladding to the face of glazing. We had a study session on this. Oh, could you dim the lights on the screen, please? In June, and so I'm just going to quickly go over these the 4 issues. There was really only one that had significant discussion. The neighborhood center overlay uses applies to neighborhood center overlays in the northeast and northwest portions of the downtown sub-area. The current QFC Rite Aid shopping area and in the northwest, and the under construction village at Beardsley Crossing in the northeast. The recommendation here is to allow change of use in those areas to happen according to the zoning that existed when those areas were developed. And then apply the new uses when there is significant redevelopment that meets the threshold for compliance with the downtown plan. And we've also tweaked the some of the allowed uses there to eliminate or reduce the number of non-conforming uses, recognizing some of the traditional uses there. So it starts with the uses allowed in the district charts here. I'm not going to go over this in detail. And then is explained in more detail in the use category charts here. Basically, the 3 uses that we're adding are appliance and electronic stores, secondhand antiques shops that are existing uses within the neighborhood center overlay. And we're also adding auto supply center as an allowed use. There aren't any currently, but one was recently displaced, and this would provide another appropriate place for that kind of use in the downtown sub-area. And then we also there were already some provisional uses for exceeding the size limits for some of the uses, but not for eating and drinking establishments. And we're now adding a provisional exception for those to exceed the size limitation, as long as it's deemed to be appropriate, consistent with the downtown vision. And this will apply at the Village of Beardsley Crossing. They do have a prospective tenant that will be above the limit there. So in the future, if there is substantial redevelopment, there won't be any issues with that use continuing. I think that pretty much covers the NCO use provisions. The majority of the discussion has been over the sidewalk use permitting, where we had some inconsistencies internal to the code, and we wanted to make sure that that throughout the code we were consistent in requiring a minimum 5 feet of unobstructed sidewalk width, and also providing for other standards and appropriate fees for public use or private use of the public ways. So we looked at a number of examples. Planning Commission heard testimony about Kirkland's requirements. So these images are from Kirkland. The one thing that we have added tonight are proposed fees, and these fees are designed to encourage sidewalk cafes and other amenities as downtown does develop. So the fees were really kept to the minimum, as we will see here shortly. We also have addressed existing uses of the public rights of way. We still want to get certificates of insurance for these uses, but we have exempted established existing uses from the permitting fees. So we're not going to be going after these existing uses. And part of the thinking there is that particularly for this sidewalk cafe tandem, that the assumption is that was all reviewed and when they got their tenant improvement for the construction of that. So we don't need to require them to pay another fee for review and inspection of that. And for the Steve's Cafe situation or other uses like the antique shop that puts merchandise out on the sidewalk, we won't be charging an application fee for those existing and established uses, but we will keep the fee for that type of use that isn't an exclusive use that's cordoned off like the sidewalk cafe to a very minimal charge to cover the cost of processing and keeping track of the paperwork. So in your packet there was a comparison of other cities, what they charge. Seattle, Kirkland, and Edmonds were all studied, and what we're proposing for Bothell is a application fee for exclusive ongoing use of the public way, as you would have for a sidewalk cafe, for a restaurant that serves alcohol that has to do a railing around that space that stays there even when the restaurant is closed. That would have a fee that is adequate for a minimum of 1 hour each for review and inspection of their proposed facility. We have chosen not initially to charge any square footage rental fee for the use of the sidewalk, as all three of the other jurisdictions do. Again, in order to, as we have kind of this fledgling downtown environment, we want to encourage that kind of use to activate the street frontages, and we've again kept the fee for non-exclusive use of the sidewalk to a minimal $50. So $323 for exclusive use of the sidewalk and $50 for non-exclusive uses. And just as an example, this is the proposed sidewalk cafe in the Six Oaks building, the Amaro Bistro on the northeast corner of the Six Oaks development. So in this image here, north is to your right. This is Bothell Way, runs across the bottom, and the Northeast 185th Street extension along the right side. So they are proposing a very extensive sidewalk cafe. And another issue that came up both at Planning Commission and at the study session council was a request that we look at ways to allow them to provide the sidewalk cafe space that they wanted to by considering the use of tree grates instead of the landscape tree pits to provide another foot of walkable area there. So we did administratively come up with a mutually acceptable solution, which has the developer of that project replacing, or actually the developer is installing the sidewalk, and we allowed them to change that out to tree grates at their cost with uplights to fit in the tree grates also at their cost. And that work all has to be reversible if this if the sidewalk cafe goes away and we want to reinstate the consistent landscaping up and down the boulevard. And they also have to replace the landscaping that was to go in those tree pits in containers at suitable places around their cafe. So that's the solution that we worked out with the developer.
Hey, Dave, how
that.
many more slides do you think you might be jumping to?
Just a handful. I think very close to being done. Yeah.
Okay.
The third amendment in the group was parking reductions in the central downtown districts, and here it was mostly just a matter of clarifying the code so that it was clear that parking reductions for green buildings do apply to developments in the downtown core areas, but not the parking reductions for transit reductions. So we separated those out in the code to make that clearer. And then the final code amendment had to do with window glazing inset requirement that was required 3-inch inset between the face of cladding to the window. Developers made a convincing argument that was very difficult to do with the products that are available on the market today without creating some infiltration issues. So we've reduced the requirement to 1.5 inches and added a guideline encouraging insets over the whole building that average 3 inches, which the 104 in the picture here accomplished by combining brick-clad portions with more traditionally clad portions. And again, in this picture. So at this point, finish my presentation. Council can take public testimony, if any, move and vote, move to close the public hearing, do deliberations, and move and vote to consider the recommended action. So with that, open it up for any questions.
Yeah, and I failed at the beginning to formally say that it was a public hearing, that it was open. So we definitely have an open public hearing. And to that note, I'd like to open up to the public for comment. First person on the list was actually Mary Farley, who I do not see, unless she's gone through a dramatic transformation. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to make comment on this item? All right, seeing none.
And I think Mary Farley actually was speaking to the next issue primarily. Yeah.
She signed up on 14/1/28, which is what I have here.
Right, but I think that was
maybe
she meant to do the other.
signed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, she did speak earlier during the public comment, but did not sign up on 129. So there's the old sign-up sheet. Nobody's speaking to it currently this evening. Is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any deliberation? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote, the clerk can clear the board for us first. And if everybody could place their vote now, and the clerk display. One more time, if everybody could vote. And we'll try it one more time. There we go. It looks like it passes unanimously, so the public hearing is closed. Is there any council deliberation or conversation questions?
I'd move the recommended action.
Second. We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Sandberg. Is there any deliberation on the underlying motion? Councilmember Sandberg.
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion. I think a lot of these are just housekeeping amendments, but the one thing that did get a lot of conversation was the public area use permit, and I feel pretty comfortable with the user fees that staff has come up with, and I am pleased to see that existing uses are not subject to either one of the permit fees, the whatever the exclusive use and then the other. So I think existing businesses who are using those using sidewalks to advertise merchandising or put out a few tables are going to feel happy that they're not subject to this user fee. So for that reason, I'm going to be supporting it.
So I'll speak to it. My number one concern is that we start making our sidewalks look like they're community garage sales. And some of the standards of the tables that I've seen out there are a bit concerning to me. And I'd love to see if there's an ability to have more of a consistent quality of table, if we're going to have it for public display as we drive by through the city of Bothell, that people see that we have some standards in regards to those tables. Because some of the tables that are being used are not for outside use, they're for inside use, and covered with laminate and not really appealing. A lot of the cities I've gone to really have some amazing sidewalk cafes, and I see more of a standard of a table out there that's more black iron, that may be more presentable and more durable for the weather and consistent throughout the city. So this currently doesn't require that. I can't make any motions to that end, but it's certainly something that I'd like to see going forward, and maybe it's not part of this motion, but it's something that comes back, unless somebody would make an amendment to say that we bring a consistent quality standard to the tables that are used in these outside cafes. So that's my only comment. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Councilmember Evans.
I appreciate the work the staff's done on this too, and the Planning Commission, and agree with the fees and things that have been set forth. I was glad to see. I like the idea of the tree grates. I think sometimes landscaping around the individual trees can be a real challenge from a maintenance standpoint. So I like the idea of the tree grates for maintenance reasons, and also to provide some additional space there. And also, and we're not losing that landscaping. That landscaping is going to be incorporated back into the cafe design landscaping. So I think that's good. But I think the tree grates are a good thing. So I appreciate the work the council, or that the staff and the Planning Commission have done on this, and I'll be voting in favor of it.
Great, thank you, Bill.
So I'll speak to the motion as well, though, Mr. Mayor. Can I make a point of inquiry of staff, even though we're in debate? It spoke to the issue that you had raised.
Yeah.
So, Dave, on that note, if we wanted to have some sort of standard, I mean, is there a standard now in terms of whether it be here or somewhere else in our code if somebody puts out sort of unsightly furniture or something that's, like if somebody were to put a sofa, I don't think anyone's done this, on the, what would we be able to, would we need this code to say, that's unsightly, please put the sofa back inside?
This did come up a bit at the study session. We certainly, our public nuisance portions of the code would allow us to remove anything that was deemed to be a public nuisance. And we are planning to develop a standard for these sidewalk as part of our design standards. Won't be part of the code itself, but that is the plan. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Okay. So I'll be supporting this. I want to thank the work that our Planning Commission did. Our Planning Commission does great work in this city, and they spent a lot of time on this. They did a lot of detail work and listened to our community. And there's a lot of things that are encompassed in this. I think it's a good step forward for the continued revitalization of our downtown, and I look forward to supporting the motion.
Councilmember Rayam or Sandberg? Oh, you spoke. Okay. Want a second chance? All right. Seeing no further conversation, deliberation, the recommended action moved by Councilmember Lamb, seconded by Councilmember Sandberg, was to move and vote to approve the proposed ordinance and resolution amending the city fee resolution and to add public area fees. All can place their vote. And if the clerk can display, passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Thank you, Dave, for your presentation, your leadership today on this matter. Are you with us on the upcoming matter as well? You are.
Yeah.
So next item on the agenda is AB 14-129, which is a public hearing on proposed code amendments to remove the existing residential density limit in the downtown transition district and consider a proposed council findings, conclusions, and action, and propose ordinance approving the amendment. So I formally open the public hearing and then ask Dave Boyd to make his presentation. Thank you, Dave. And 1 second, Dave. You have a question, Bill?
Yes. Did we add time to this item?
We do. We actually have 45 minutes rather than 30.
So do we need to extend the meeting at this point, say to 9:15 or 9:30, knowing that this is going to go over?
So based upon the time requested, that would be 9:45 or so. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, I'd move that we extend the meeting to 9:30.
Second.
Any deliberation? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote, and a clerk can display. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. So Dave, back to you. Thank you.
Okay. So this amendment, again, was also initiated in 2013 at the request of Marlon Gabbert and Dick Paler, who are here tonight, to remove the 20-unit per acre density limit in the downtown transition district. That density limit was added very late in the process. The original proposal was to not have any density limits on the central downtown districts and just let height, setbacks, and parking requirements control the density. The downtown transition districts basically flank lower Maywood Hill, north of 185th and east of Bothell Way, and also flank West Hill on the west side of the downtown sub-area. The code amendments, well, first of all, before we get to the amendments, the plan did include special setback regulations. The height limit was reduced from four floors and 45 feet to 3 floors and 35 feet to address concerns about that transition. The special setback regulations provide some additional buffering from adjacent residential uses, and I want to note that the staff finds that this provides substantial protection and need not be increased. That was one of the questions that came out in the study session. The proposal would be to simply eliminate that special density requirement, and we don't feel that limiting that to just part of the downtown transition district is warranted, but there is a special measure for residential only use adjacent to single-family zoning along the west edge of the sub-area. So that is a provision that has been used for another purpose here. So one of the questions was, could 3 stories of office be achieved with the available parking? And this is on the example that the proponents provided us with, which provides parking for 15 cars, which could be 18 if these were off the alley were made tandem spaces, which would be allowed with certain provisions. And if the residential levels, 2 levels of residential, were converted to office, that would be adequate parking for a 3-story office structure. So the bulk could be achieved with office building, and this amendment would allow it to be achieved also with residential development. So that concludes my presentation. This map again shows the district with some representative densities of existing development, both in that district and immediately adjacent to it. And I've got the other examples that I shared at the study session if they come up in the deliberations.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate the presentation. So we do have our public comment section next. So first we'll take public comment from the public, and then we'll ask for questions from council, and then if there's no questions, then we'll ask for a motion. So I have one sign up currently this evening, Marlene Gabbert, if you would like to come forward.
And I failed to introduce two exhibits. You received a email from Pat Pierce. I've got a copy of that. And then I do have an email from Dick Paler in response to Pat Pierce that I'll circulate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave. Marlon.
Marlon Gabbert. My office is at 18422 103rd Avenue Northeast, just up the block here. Phone number 425-482-7987. Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm speaking in favor of the amendment, I guess since we proposed it. And my office happens to be across the street from the transitional zone on 185th, and I've observed the condo unit, a 5-unit condo unit right across the street to the north of my office on 185th. And the parking, the building is right next to that sketch you had of the proposed site. And they have 10 parking stalls on that building, and they have 5 units. During the day, there are only 2 cars in that parking lot. The street is full of cars, but there are only 2 cars in the parking lot. And then in the evening, there are 8 cars in the parking lot. Parking seems to be a problem around my office during the day when the businesses are in business. But in the evenings, there's a lot of parking. And so the residential zoning will actually help the area there to increase the density. It'll also be a positive for the city of Bothell because there will be more people living in the area to support the downtown businesses. And there have been studies made that it's the residential density that really affects the viability, the commercial viability of the businesses in that area. And not so much offices, but residential. So I'm in favor of developing a more of the form-based code that you have to remove that density factor, because it really does not help the city in terms of reaching the density that they need to have, or you need to have. Sorry, I speak from being in Shoreline. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbert. Nice to see you again this evening. Oh, you might have one question. Councilmember Sandberg has a question for you.
Hi.
Hi.
In the staff's agenda packet, they list they show your project as sort of an example project.
Yeah, yes.
And can you tell me what the approximate size of those residential units was in that drawing? Because we are not able to tell on the agenda packet.
Well, they would be 1-bedroom units, and usually 1-bedroom units can run from 700 square feet to 750, maybe a little smaller, depends upon. They could, you can get probably 450 would be the smallest studio unit you'd want to have, but people aren't building studio units anymore. They're usually around 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. In fact, I have a client in today, and they wanted to build mainly 2-bedroom units and a few 1-bedroom, but no studios at all. So studios might be okay if you're on the campus or close to the campus where you might have student housing, but for developers that are developing the buildings in this downtown area, they would want to have more bedrooms.
And then last week, the Seattle Times published an article about Seattle's issue with, I guess they call them micro apartments, where they're building units that are like 220 square feet and less, and so the neighborhoods there are concerned about the impacts from having not just the size of the unit, but the density that it allows. And so are you saying that you don't think the Bothell market supports?
I don't think the Bothell market would support that. Seattle is a strange animal in the area here, and you have parking. Then you have in those areas where you're going to have those micro units, you have no parking requirements too. Mm-hmm. Seattle has been, over the years, have been trying to get people not to use cars, and they're trying to keep cars out of downtown Seattle. I've done 2-3 mixed-use buildings down in Seattle. One in the north end of Lake Union was 80 units, and one in the Roosevelt area was about 75, and then a 30 unit that was over in the Greenwood area, and many apartment houses, but these were mixed-use buildings. And most of the micro units have been kind of a design that's taken off from a developer that just was pushing those because of the success in certain areas. But I don't think that would work in Bothell, and I would not like to see Bothell do micro units myself. But I don't live here, but I do have my office here. So would it then be reasonable if we were to remove the density limit in the downtown transition to have a minimum size unit to discourage or to disallow micro apartments? I mean, it doesn't seem to me like it would hurt your business. Or No, I think that would be a fair amendment to the amendment. Having been a chair of the Planning Commission for the city of Shoreline, I kind of understand the issues that you have to go through here to develop a code that makes sense and that works for developers as well as the investors and as well as the city. So it's a balancing act.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Dick, are you coming forward? Great, Mr. Dick Paler. We know where you live. Unless you'd like to give your address again.
Dick Paler, 9013 Northeast 190th Street here in beautiful Bothell. Let me just add to the discussion right at the end of Marlon's comments and Councilmember Sandberg's question. Again, I think Marlon touched on it, but the big issue with the micro units in Seattle is because Seattle requires zero parking when those are being built. That's where the biggest problems are coming. If you did build, I'm not making an argument for micro units here, but if somebody was building that, you still have to build a parking space for every one of those, for every bedroom or unit at a minimum. So even if they were allowed here, it's not going to create the same kind of problem that it was in those Seattle neighborhoods, is the only point I want to make. But my comments are pretty much what you've already seen in writing. But this code amendment is about density. It isn't per se about parking. I do understand people's fears about parking problems. I do get that. But I think that they're largely based on a misconception of hypothetical parking problems created by any future development in the downtown transition zone. The first thing that I think is lost on most people that consider this is the party that has the most at risk by building a building that doesn't have enough parking is the person who builds the building and finances it, because it's going to mean you're going to have a tougher time renting those units if you're not providing the parking that the customer requires. Not any different than any other business. You can have a great restaurant, but if you don't have enough seats, you're not going to be able to serve those customers. And if anything, a developer has an incentive to round up on the parking needed to have a successful project, regardless of what the minimum code might allow, and more units means more parking. One thing is for sure, any project that doesn't have enough parking will find it more difficult to maintain occupancy and will suffer financially. Conversely, a code requirement that results in excess parking benefits no one and unnecessarily drives up the cost of the project and the rent charged to the tenants. More than anything, the success of downtown depends on density, and I'd be the first to agree that density needs to mitigate its impacts. The truth is there's zero evidence that any parking problems in the downtown area that may or may not exist has anything to do with multifamily development. I would argue it's more due to construction activity. The people working for the contractors building the building are parking downtown while the construction's going on. A busier lunch crowd at restaurants, that's a good thing. And to some degree, students from the campus looking to avoid the daily parking fee. No additional parking in a residential building would change this. If anything, having more residential density near the campus will permit some of these students to live and go to school here without the car and the parking space needed to commute to school. The same could be said for those who commute to a job in the downtown area. I'll just quickly jump to the, my summary is I do think the density is part of the solution, not part of the problem. We all know under the Growth Management Act we have to take in so much density in our community, and I think there was a deliberate effort in the downtown plan by concentrating development downtown means that we need less density in the neighborhoods. So to that extent, it's a benefit to the neighborhoods to have the density concentrated downtown. And then lastly, by concentrating all this development downtown, we build a bigger tax base. The bigger the tax base downtown, the less taxes we need from the people in the neighborhood. So I think the staff has it right. I think they had it right the first time, and I appreciate their effort to bring it back here again. So I definitely support the recommended action.
Great. 1 second, if you wouldn't mind. Councilmember Lamb has a question for you, and I think Councilmember Sandberg.
Sure.
So I have a question because you seem kind of mid-thought on this. On the density impacts, you're saying that parking isn't one of the things that isn't one of the impacts that multifamily density is causing. Isn't one of the, because you said, I think that I agree that density needs to mitigate its impact.
Yes.
What do you think those impacts are? If it's not parking, what?
Well, no. The impact could be a parking problem if you weren't providing the parking on site. And so the code that we have now does mitigate that impact, just like, the need for landscaping or open space or whatever at a site. The current
so you're just saying
code.
that you don't want to see additional, you feel like to cap density as a way to address a perceived concern about parking is inappropriate because you think the current parking allocation is adequate.
Exactly correct.
Okay, all right,
And I think that's a scalable problem, too. If it's a problem on this site, the code, it doesn't matter if the building's 65 feet or 35 feet. If it's, the parking requirement is not enough, it's not enough for 65, just like 35. So.
Great. Thank you, Dick. And I believe Councilmember Sandberg has a question as well.
You said that you think that the most to lose, the party with the most to lose by a project with insufficient parking is the owner or the developer.
Yes.
And I can completely see that in a retail type situation where if the customer can't park and shop or buy food, then yes, that does hurt the owner and developer. But what I've heard people express and what was expressed in that article in the Seattle Times was that that these the density that doesn't provide for the parking, those folks just go and park someplace else in the neighborhood, and we're seeing that happen because. Like some of these projects, they're charging $100 a month in addition to rent to park your car. So the incentive is to go park someplace else on the street. And so what we're hearing is anecdotal evidence that they are experiencing the impacts of underparked development. And when you say there's zero evidence that any parking problem in the downtown area may or may not exist that has anything to do with multifamily development, I think that's a true statement because we haven't done a parking study in the downtown area to know where the parking problem has generated from. So it may not have anything to do with multifamily development or the proposed development under this change, but it may or may not. We don't know, but what we have is anecdotal information where people are parking on sidewalks. You can't park anywhere during the day easily in downtown. Which I know you addressed as sort of a day versus night use, but I'm hearing that we have a parking problem. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is I'm hearing that we're having a parking problem and we haven't done enough analysis to say exactly what that parking problem is. And then, so what happens if we exacerbate that with this code change that doesn't provide for adequate parking?
Well, the code change, I would argue, doesn't have anything. I mean, I think the current parking requirement, it works. And so far, there's no evidence to show that it doesn't work. The parking problem that you're referring to, I've heard people say the same thing. But I will tell you, I heard that before the 104 was even finished. So it couldn't have been caused by new development that doesn't have a density limit. You know, maybe somebody could say, well, maybe it will in the future. But all I'm saying is, to the extent we have a parking problem, it isn't a result of new construction. And the people who, at the 104, I've heard the same thing, that some people have chosen not to pay the $100 for a parking stall, so they're parking on the street. I can tell you this, that if they have more vacancy because they're charging for parking, guess what? The parking charge will either go down or disappear, or they'll give you 6 months free or whatever it is to rent the apartment. They'll adjust that as necessary to keep their apartment building full. On the other hand, if you do have people who are saying, hey, I'll just park on the street and not pay the $100, well, at some point, I mean, if that's where the problem's coming from, then it's a public parking management issue. It's not because they haven't built enough parking there. It's, you know, you're saying the parking, some people are choosing not to pay it. That's a market force thing. It's not a lack of parking. And in that particular building, I put in my written comments, I don't know if you read it, but I represent Health Point, and when they built their clinic, they were underparked. So we made a deal with the developers of the 104 to where they lease 28 parking stalls in that building during daytime business hours. And the reason they're able to do that is because the residents in the building are away somewhere else at their job during the day. The parking space is available. So to that extent, the development of that building is contributing to the solution about parking. It's not adding to the problem. Because otherwise, those Health Point patients and staff members would be out parking on the street as well. And at some point, if this parking problem becomes a permanent thing, then, you know, I suppose we'll have to go to 2-hour parking everywhere downtown and start managing it so somebody can't leave their car parked in one of those spaces for 3 days at a time. Building more parking in the building. Right now, there's no evidence that the parking in the buildings isn't enough for the tenants. If they choose not to pay for it, that's a different issue.
Okay. Thanks so much, Dick. Appreciate it. I don't see anybody else from the public here. So assuming there's no further public comment, we can jump to council questions of staff. Anybody? So if there's, okay.
Dave, could you explain how the size of the building, what's the example you listed here, that we don't need a density because the site in the construction of the building will determine what fits on that site? Is that just the codes that does that? How does that work?
Well, the code sets the overall building envelope by the height limit and the setback requirements. So that's one constraint. But the bigger constraint more typically is how much parking can reasonably be fit on the site. So on the example that I showed you, they pretty much maxed out the parking that could be fit on the site, given and the code also has constraints on parking design. You can't put the parking in front of on the street front. So they can build 15 to 18 parking spots on that site, and that is going to control how many units they can build there. If the market is for bigger units and that would require more cars, they would do fewer units, fewer larger units. But right now, the market seems to be primarily for one-bedroom apartments, and so that's what we're seeing, and that's what fits on that site with the amount of parking that they can fit there.
And I don't know. I guess I see parking problems down there at times, and I see parking problems not at times or when there is. And maybe it's during the day, and like Dick said, you know, is that being caused by the restaurants, or what are the causes of that downtown parking? Has the staff done any analysis or any of our existing parking and how it's being used, and what that, do we feel it's adequate or inadequate? Do we need more? How does that, have you looked at that?
Well, prior to the downtown plan, we did a transportation study and plan that did look at parking utilization, on-street parking utilization, and it determined, and that was 2006, 2007, that there was unused capacity on the street. I think it's true that with all the impacts, construction and other impacts, that situation has changed, and we did restripe that downtown area to create some more parking, but we haven't done a detailed parking study since then.
And I guess I can understand what the residents are saying. I mean, whether it's perceived or not, if they don't feel like there's adequate parking, or if they come home and they can't park in front of their own property or whatever the case may be, then in their mind there's not enough parking. So I think this issue of parking is kind of like an HVAC in a building. You never quite get that HVAC right. It's always a little different. And you know, what's the right amount of parking and not too much parking, that type of thing is kind of something that there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and it's kind of somewhat in a state of flux at times. But you know, I'm not sure. I don't want the residents in downtown or the residents in the transition area to have a parking problem. I think they should have a right to be able to not have parking overflow into their areas and things. But you know, if that happens to some degree, I guess that's a good thing, because downtown is busy and being used too. So, but it's a I don't know. It's a hard one to really put a finger on exactly what's the actual situation.
Okay. Further questions for staff? And just to make clarity, tonight I've been more lenient on when we actually have a motion on the floor to ask questions of staff at that point. Typically, that's not our process. So after a motion is made, all questions will be asked to ask the chair and then direct to the staff. But at this point, I'd love to get our questions out.
Are we going to have an opportunity to deliberate amongst ourselves before we put a motion on the floor, or are we just going to go straight to a motion? Because I think we have an opportunity to have some conversation here, and sometimes it's hard to do that when there's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, we kind of do it at the same time when we're asking questions of staff, I guess, and throw your ideology out there, whatever it may be, and people can take issues of that or not. Well, I don't know another word to choose, but ideas.
Well, then, may I have the floor?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't have any questions of staff because Dave and I talked at length today.
Great.
So this is more ideology deliberation. So I understand the points made by the speaker, but I continue to be concerned about setting the parking ratio at 0.75 spaces per unit, per bedroom, and in addition, removing the density limit. Whenever, in the Seattle article, and when we've heard from the residents talking tonight, parking is always an issue. And so I would feel more comfortable if we were removing the density limit to follow the lead that we took with the general downtown corridor, which we changed that parking to one space per bedroom. Now, granted, it was a different change. In that instance, we were talking about going from 2.2 parking spaces per unit, changing that to a per bedroom. Okay, and in this instance, it's already zoned per bedroom. And so what I'm asking is a change an increase from the 0.75 parking spaces per bedroom to make it consistent with the general downtown corridor. And you know, I get the Health Point and the 104 sharing arrangement, and I think that works because they're in the downtown neighborhood district. But when you get out into the transition district, you're getting more into the neighborhood and farther away from businesses where that sharing could be beneficial and useful. And so I just don't feel like the 104 Health Point is going to be as applicable in the transition, the downtown transition district, because it is farther out, and I don't see those opportunities for sharing. And then what you're left with is potentially inadequately parked residential units, and a one stall per bedroom is not an unusual or an onerous parking requirement. I mean, we went through this whole discussion already with the general downtown corridor. So that's what I would like us to have a conversation about. And then I also asked about the minimum unit size, because I don't know. Well, I heard that this market, the Bothell market, won't support a micro unit approach, but I don't know. And Mr. Gabbard didn't seem to disagree with the idea of a minimum unit size. I don't know if you need both. If you're going to have a parking requirement of one space per bedroom, you might not need a restriction on unit size in that case. So I guess I wanted to have that conversation. And then I also wanted to point out that Seattle has a public design review process for developments that have greater than 8 units. And Dave and I talked about that as well. And a public design review process isn't always a great thing. It creates maybe an unrealistic expectation on the part of the residents that they're going to be able to change something, and then it lengthens out the development time and adds to the cost. So I'm not sure that a public design review process is. I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that they have that in Seattle, and we always consider Seattle to be the paragon of high density development. So I guess I struggle with in the findings where it says this change provides adequate protection for the residential zones. But if we just remove the density limit and don't do something for the parking or something to address the possibility of ultra small units, I don't feel comfortable that we were protecting those neighboring residential neighboring residential homes. So I guess with that, I'd like to hear. Oh, one other thing. We did talk about the fact that having a parking ratio of one stall per bedroom would possibly serve as a disincentive for family housing, because if you have like 3+ bedrooms, then you would require more parking than maybe necessary for a 2-car family. And so we talked about the possibility of having a different parking requirement on the west side at the base of West Hill, which already has its own unique requirements for residential only development, which might be appropriate and attractive for family style housing, have a different parking requirement that didn't disincentivize the 3+ bedroom units over there, but recognize that the market on the east side really is predominantly studio and 1 bedroom. Predominantly, like I think our example so far is like 80 to 85% of what's been building so far is studio and 1 bedroom. Thank you.
So just for clarity, since we want to have more of a conversation, my understanding, you would potentially be open, or maybe not, if a density is withdrawn at the cap of 20, you would want to see that parking would go up to at least one, and you'd also want to limit the size or set a minimum for the size of any unit. So it couldn't be 250 square feet, under 250 square feet. I've not heard of that component in any code. Where do they do that you know of?
Well, so in that Seattle Times article, the proposal was, I think, to have a minimum unit size of 220 square feet. But they're dealing with shared kitchens where they have units like are 180 square feet, which I'm hearing is not really a market here. But again, you never know. So, and then our building code, our building code has a floor on a unit size of, I guess Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 220 square feet plus a bathroom plus a closet, or maybe the closet is included in the living area. But you're.
Is that right, Dave?
Yes, that's building code for efficiency units, and that's kind of squeezing the envelope down to the very minimum that you could do.
Yeah, apartments is what they're called. Some of these
Well,
things in Seattle, right?
So the building code doesn't really address apartments. They talk about efficiency units, so these would be self-sustained units. The apartments, there really would be very little incentive for someone to build apartments in any of our districts that have a per-bedroom parking requirement. Because essentially what they do is where either they're built in zones where there's no parking requirement, or if there is, they have 5 rooms rented individually with a shared kitchen. They call that one unit.
Yep.
Up to 8 rooms. So that wouldn't fly in Bothell. Each bedroom would have to have its 0.75 parking stalls. So.
Cool. Okay.
So,
thanks, Tristan.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to extend until at least 9:45, so we can kind of get our bearings on where we're going.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lamb, second by Councilmember Sandberg. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So it passes 5-0. I think, Trish, you still had the floor. No, that's right. I asked you the question. Anybody other further questions of the oration? Anybody want to close the public comment section?
I actually did have a question of staff. Dave, so where are all of the current developments in the downtown neighborhood and downtown core that are being constructed?
Where are they? I'm sorry.
So currently we have the 104, which is open.
Right.
We have Six Oaks.
Right.
We have Beardsley Crossing. Of those three, and I know Six Oaks is in the downtown core. Is that correct?
It's
Zoning?
split between downtown core and downtown neighborhood.
But it has
predominantly downtown.
There's no
core.
limit on the density in that unit. Is that the same as Beardsley Crossing?
No, Beardsley Crossing is developing under the old code, which
that was RAC, wasn't it?
Which was RAC, and yes, it did not have RAC didn't have a density limit either. It was the density was based on or limited by the height and
height
scale.
So do you? And I understand that staff is supporting this proposal. I mean, do you see right now an activity on the development side in the downtown transition district? Do you see people looking to build in that area? Because, I mean, on some level, we have a lot of building going on at Bothell. We have a lot of residential construction going on at Bothell. And so, a skeptic might say, what's the problem? We have a huge amount of economic activity. We have a huge amount of people moving into our downtown core. Are there a number of people who are sort of up against this challenge where they would love to build, have people ready to move in, but aren't able to do so or are constrained by this density cap?
Well, I think the applicants have a client that has a piece of property that they don't feel can be developed with the density cap. They'd only be able to do 3 units.
But beyond that, are there currently people who are building under? It's very bucolic in here all of a sudden. Do we have another? Are there any other applicants in the downtown transition area who are doing anything?
No applicants today. We've had pre-application proposals for Lot O, which has a significant piece of downtown transition, and several subsequent developers who have expressed interest in that. They have mostly all indicated that the density limit is an issue, maybe not a absolutely unsurmountable issue, because they do have other. That's a split zone lot between downtown transition, downtown neighborhood. We've had inquiries about other downtown transition properties, and they're very interested in this code amendment. Because at least the implication has been that they won't move forward without the density limit being removed. So
that's the only question that I have at this time.
Bill.
Well, just to follow up on that, so if the density limit, and I don't know maybe whether you've had these discussions with them or not, so if the density cap is removed, but we increase the parking requirement, is that a problem for them, or has that even been discussed with them or come up?
I have not discussed that because that's a notion that's come up fairly recently. I know that on the downtown general downtown corridor site that generated that code and that amendment, the one per, nothing's happened with that development since that was amended to one per unit, and I don't know if that was a significant factor in that proposal not moving forward, but that's in the general downtown corridor, the site that kind of generated that that set of amendments.
I'm not sensing any great direction here from anyone. And I don't know if I want to take a motion for closing public comment. I wonder if we should be bringing this back for a second conversation and further consideration, or is somebody ready to make a motion? Bill?
I just wanted to weigh in with a little bit of information, and that is that this is really just sort of augmenting what other folks have said, staff and the folks in the audience. We hear from developer after developer after developer that it's parking that controls the unit yield. I won't refer to it as density, but the number of units you can get on a piece of property. And when you think about it, it's pretty easy to see. You can stack residential units. You can go floor after floor after floor, but you can't stack parking very easily. Most folks would like to keep it on one floor. It's very expensive to structure parking. For one thing, you lose a lot of potential parking in the ramps that are necessary to connect levels unless you have enough topography on the site that you can have an entrance at this level and an entrance at that level. That's not the case in most places. Parking is very expensive to build. Mm-hmm. Each parking stall requires about 220 square feet of area. That's the stall itself, and then half of an aisle to back up in. So when you add that up, it takes a lot of land, especially when you consider the land you lose in columns between stalls and landscaping if it's outdoors. So to answer your question, Councilmember Evans, if we go from 0.75 stalls per bedroom to 1 stall per bedroom, that directly translates to some impact on unit yield. That's all I had to contribute
on this matter. So I leave it to council. We will end in 11 short minutes, but I'm not sensing that there's any.
I would move to continue this to a date certain, and I guess I would look to the city manager for guidance as to when that would be.
Next meeting, or
this is your desire is to continue with the public hearing?
Yes,
that's correct.
Or do we need to continue, or would your recommendation be that we close the public hearing and deliberate?
I don't know if there's a legal necessity that you need to keep the public hearing open. You can certainly take
Does that
public
restrict
comment.
us in terms of advertising then if we keep the public hearing open, or do you have a recommendation one way or the other?
I don't have a recommendation. You have far more flexibility to simply allow me to schedule a meeting.
If we don't have a public hearing.
If we don't have a public hearing, it'll just be brought back at a time that's convenient for the schedule.
And we don't need to terminate the public hearing to do that. We would simply say bring this back, or is this required to be by a public hearing to adopt this?
Well, I think you should probably close the public hearing. If you simply close the meeting tonight, I think, and in fact, that closes the public hearing as well, unless you, by motion, extend it. But you were required to have a public hearing for this.
We have 2 council members that weren't here.
Yeah.
To receive public comment.
So I guess I would move to continue this public hearing. I'd ask for your guidance as to when would be inappropriate. Or do I need to do it to a date certain, or can we?
I think you can do it for a date certain, and maybe if you can pick not the next week, but the following week. I don't know what date that is.
Next week's a study session normally, and the week after that is full. I'm looking at the projected agenda, and I see that on October 7th, which is a regular meeting, there appears to be some capacity on that meeting, so that might make the most sense.
All right, thank you.
That'd be fine, yeah.
Director Weisel. So, Mr. Mayor, I would move to continue this public hearing until October 7th.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lamb, second by Councilmember Ram. I heard Ram first. All right. So we'll go with Ram. Any conversation? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote to move the public hearing to October 7th, as the clerk can display. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Agnew and Spivey absent and excused. Thank you, Dave, for your presentation. We don't have any other scheduled items. I don't believe we have an executive session. No city manager reports. Any further comments for the good of the cause? Seeing none, we're adjourned.